and welcome to the Crate and Crowbar. This is episode 184. It's April 11th. I'm Tom Francis, and with me here today are...
Chris Thurston.
And...
Tom Senior.
I'm back. Hello.
Hey.
Tom's back. Hey.
Welcome back, Tom.
How was it, Tom?
It was awesome. I had a really good time. I worked on my game in an office with my new programmer, John Winder, and it's really good having a programmer on your team. It's really good having a programmer on your team and also being at Valve.
Secrets of game development.
Yeah, who knew? I get to just put all the hard stuff on his list instead of mine, and then I get to do all the easy stuff. And then when I want my game tested, I can just have anyone at Valve come and play it, and then they give me really good feedback.
You're going to miss that.
Yeah, I think for a while it'll be nice just because it's different to be home. Like, you know, not really caring when I got up. Not that I really got up at a particularly reasonable hour in the US, but it'll be nice to have their sort of total freedom for a little bit, and then I will get back into like doing a bit of co-working, I think, and forcing myself to get out of the house. But I'll still be working with John just remotely, and we'll Skype and stuff, and so I'll still have him to help out.
Is everyone on the Heat Signature a team apart from you called John?
Yes.
Okay.
That's true. We are John, and Tom.
Good. Is this a system you find makes it easier to manage things?
No, it's much, much harder. And also my dad is called John, and so every time I write an email, it is total potluck. I've invited my dad to this podcast before because I was trying to invite
You should
John
have come on.
And now, you know, any art or programming email has a decent chance of going to the wrong person or my dad. It was actually not a large factor, but a small factor against John Winder when I was reviewing candidates. So like, damn it, the good one turns out to be John.
And if you know, this would be the perfect time to reveal that your name is actually like John Tom Francis. You know, those people who get, you know, use their middle name because they were given their parents' first name or something. Just a plot twist. How is Heatsig doing?
Really well. It's shaping up really nicely. Did great at GDC, like I showed it to press there, and everyone I showed it to had, like for a while, I think since Stugan, it's been at the point where I can have great experiences with it, and it surprises me, it makes me laugh and stuff. But the big question was like, will anyone else have that? And it's very hard to test that. But it's now got to the point where even at like the low level, on doing an easy mission, all of the journalists who played it had like an amazing story that was unique and involved things I hadn't seen before. And they came away, you know, happy about it and wanting to tell that story, which is, you know, exactly the kind of game I want to make. Now, I mean, that was after I played it in front of them and showed them what a kind of madcap crazy mission looks like, and then they did an easier version of that, and so I think that helped prime them to sort of, here's how you play this game. Like, be a fucking maniac, try weird things. And so the next challenge is like, how do we make a player who doesn't have me playing it in front of him or her, like also think in that way, and also use the, just like, it's so much about pausing now. You've got to hit this pause button, to plan your approach, like once you board a ship, planning out what you're going to do. And then also anytime anything happens, you want to pause again, because it's almost always your plan has gone wrong now and you need to rethink. And if people do that, they end up having a great time. Some people just don't think to do that, and the more panicked they are, the less likely they are to kind of hit the pause button. And so I need to figure out a way to kind of teach that, and just, yeah, it's not so much about like controls and systems that I need to teach. It's more like a kind of attitude of how to play. Like, make sure you're doing this a lot.
That's like the oldest problem that like emergency systemsy games have, right? Like, there's always potential depth, but a certain amount of players will always just play Deus Ex like a shooter, or play Dishonored like a sword fighting game.
So that was really interesting, actually. Just to completely name drop, I was hanging out with my good friends Harvey Smith, Warren Spector, and Ricardo Bear, and just a casual chat that I happened to be invited to, and Steve Gaynor.
That was the thing for PCG, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a room where I'm like, what the hell am I doing? Very kindly organised by Wes Fenlon, and that was amazing. And I tried to shut up as much as possible because those are people you want to hear speak. But the one time I did speak pretty much was to put that problem to them, basically, like, because I just heard from so many friends who, particularly with Dishonored 2, just the latest example of it, would feel obliged to play in the ultra stealthy ghost way and didn't enjoy it, but felt they had to do that. Like, they would I've heard from some people who started that way and then eventually they kind of fucked it up and then started to enjoy the madcap stuff. And others who just never got that far. They're just always stuck to they had to do the purest thing and don't enjoy playing that way. So I'm trying with Heat Signature to kind of encourage you to mix it up. So missions can have requirements. So like the basic ones are just do the objective, steal the thing, kill the guy, whatever. And then the higher level ones are like steal the guy and don't let anyone see you, or steal the guy and don't kill anyone, or steal the guy. Oh, you kind of do. Like
I wasn't going to question that. But...
You you knock them out. You have to like physically carry them back to the base. You do basically steal them. Yeah. Steal the guy.
There's a word for it, but
steal the guy and like don't hurt anyone else. And then the hardest one is steal the guy, don't hurt anyone else, and also don't leave no living witnesses, which means like because you can't kill anyone, that means you can't kill the witnesses. So there just have to be no witnesses, so no one can ever see you,
including the guy, or
that's a good question. I think presently it does count if he sees you, but it probably shouldn't since you've stolen him. I mean, obviously, if he's an assassination target, like you can have a mission where you have to kill someone, but you're not allowed to hurt anyone else, and also leave no living witnesses, and that's okay if he sees you because he's dead. And also, you can bring back an assassination target alive and just deliver them alive, and then like you put them in this sort of, I don't know, it's a medical / prison pod, depending on whether you want to rescue someone or deliver them. And if you deliver an assassination target alive, I just change the mission complete message to say, oh, he seems to be alive, but we can deal with that.
Right. Like, do you think it might be this is one area of like emergent game design where you can actually solve it with like a diary? Like, you know, can you have the player followed around at the beginning of the game by you, Tom Francis, who demonstrates for the first couple of missions how to play before letting them go?
I could just make you watch a fucking video.
Well, like, I mean,
a shitty 720p, slightly compressed video of me playing the game and say, "Hi, welcome to Heat Signature. I'm Tom Francis."
But it feels like, I mean, so many people, but people probably genuinely wouldn't discover the aspects of loads of games like that without the kinds of, you know, writing and videos people did about them to unpack the breadth of those systems, right? Like, it's, you know, maybe the answer to that problem comes in part from the types of media, even if it's not specifically that, the types of media that people have made about them.
I definitely want to, I'll be doing a load of things when it launches to encourage people to share clips of things that happen to them. Like, it's so much about like crazy situations, and often like the best part of it boils down to like just a minute or 30 seconds. That, oh man, do you see when I blew out that window and this guy got sucked out, but then this other thing blew me up? And so I want to encourage and reward people for like sharing GIFs of that and videos of that, because A, I want to see them. B, it obviously is good to promote the game, and then also C, it kind of tells people, here's how you play the game, here's the crazy shit you should be doing.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of weird that Steam doesn't support GIFs on store pages.
Yeah, I just actually heard recently you can hack them in.
Right.
Like, not as your screenshots, but in the kind of description you can embed images. And if you embed a GIF and you rename it to a JPEG, it just works. Steam secrets. I didn't find that from Valve. That's like not a Valve secret.
That's hidden in a vault in the center of...
In fact, if I mentioned it at Valve, they probably would have fixed it.
Awesome. So, there's a bunch of news today, weirdly. I don't think it was going to be a very newsy day, but it is. So, as of right now, there is a new Overwatch event, which looks a little bit like the previous Overwatch event, in that they've done another PvE players versus robots.
So many robots.
There's just a lot of
Not
robots.
so many Johns.
This is what I understand about the... there's one John Robert.
He's split between the two factions.
Exactly. It's what I understand about the backstory to Overwatch is that Overwatch was created as an organization to defeat all of the robots, and in this new event, you take control of younger versions of the Overwatch heroes as you fight hordes of robots for rewards of some kind, probably hats. I actually know so little about this that I'm winging it, guys.
You know more than me. I didn't know it was like that there were younger versions of the characters. And also I didn't know they'd done this before, like the PvE thing.
They did the Halloween thing, which was called Dr. Junkrat's man versus machine.
It's really hard not to call it man versus
Yeah.
machine, isn't it?
I can't remember what it was called. It was all right. It was all right. It was
Were they robots?
yes, they were robots. They were led by you. You also fight evil versions of Overwatch heroes, like Halloween costumes. It was like they were all wearing Halloween costumes, basically. So it was like explicitly silly rather than this, which is actually steeped in the
Serious
rich
robots.
and detailed the lore of Robot War. Robert Wars being a BBC, was it Channel 4 program that
It sounds like a
they were-
historian.
Yeah, exactly. Or probably Pip's uncle, for all I know. So yeah, I don't know anything about it. As with everything Overwatch related nowadays, it's the kind of thing I will check out because I'm probably not going to uninstall that game, but I don't really play it at all. I don't know. Have you guys stuck at all? with
No,
it?
I have a bunch of friends who play it, and I'm always, tempted for that reason. And then I rarely really enjoy the game. I just find it. I feel like I have very little influence on the outcome of the game. I think I'm just bad, basically. But in particular, like I don't know, I'll just have the times when I do have a great run. We still lose crushingly, and then sometimes I'll have a terrible time, and then we just win. I just feel like, oh, this is just my experience just has so little to do with the match.
I think like a lot of Blizzard's competitive design lately, with the exception of StarCraft, which will remain this kind of outlier because of how kind of pure and hyper competitive it is. Like I quite like Heroes of the Storm one, but they're both games that are ultimately about objectives. They have kills in them, but it's kind of not how you win games at all. And all games, TF2's like that to an extent, but it feels like they have skewed really hard that way, probably for some quite clever design reason to do with accessibility and providing a type of game where I imagine that Twitch shooter skill is always going to be the barrier for a lot of people. So maybe building a game where objectives are ultimately more important provides more ways in for people who wouldn't otherwise play a shooter, which might well be one of the reasons that Overwatch is as big as it is. But yeah, I find that feeling of like, well, this didn't really matter because we either did or did not push the car.
Yeah.
That's I'd like to like it more than I do, but weirdly, almost a year after release, and we're coming up to the first anniversary of Overwatch.
Wow.
Like,
Usually I'm always like, wow, was it that long ago? But this time it actually feels like longer. I feel like it's been out. For
yeah, I
longer.
thought, like, I always had to, for a work thing recently, I had to check, like, when it actually came out, and I was so convinced it was 2015, which is dumb, but no, it was,
I guess
May last
there was
year.
a beta for a while beforehand, right?
Yeah, like, end of 2015, but nonetheless, like, so yeah, so many people love it and play it every day. I think it would help a great deal if I had friends who played it regularly, because I think that probably is a difference maker, because then you can feel effective because you're coming up with a plan as a group and executing it.
Yeah,
But
actually, that's my other problem with it. It was exactly what I had with TF2, and I love TF2 and I played it a lot, but ultimately, both are games about coordination, and I am not good at coordination just via like voice comms or typing chat messages or whatever, and I don't want to lead particularly, and I also don't really want to follow other people's orders, and I also feel like those games don't give you any really good tools for coordination. If they had some kind of like, if they've gone really deep on like drawing on the map and kind of come up with a plan, and I would love it if you could like on the map say, okay, I think we should have like a diva go in here and then a tracer come up behind and then a Hanzo do that. And then you propose that to the team, and people can like click on like, yeah, I'll be the diva, I'll be the Hanzo or whatever, and then you all spawn at the same time, and you'll go out and do it. And obviously, people would be free to ignore you, and it wouldn't necessarily help. But if you had like 3 friends in a public game, you could sort of at least coordinate that way, rather than trying to explain what should happen and then also make it happen. There's so many obstacles between the plan and that happening that plans basically don't matter. Rarely comes off.
I wonder why I'm going to maybe be wrong, but it seems like nobody like followed up on the potential of like natural selections having a commander in an FPS thing. I think didn't Battlefield 2 had the same thing as well. Like, that's such a cool idea, and it genuinely works. But
and I really found my place in that game because you had a commander and then you had squads, and my place in the hierarchy, I've talked about this before, I know, is squad leader. That's the exact level of responsibility and authority that I want. Like, I want to ultimately be told what to do by someone else, but I want to be in charge of how I do it, and I want a few people with me who I can say, like, It's not even so much about ordering them, because if you really just like the commander tells you take that capture point, and then you tell your guys, hey, let's take that capture point. I've got an idea. Let's do this. And then you get extra points because you told them to do it when they did it. But then also they could spawn on you as well. So you became like this kind of like backbone of the force. Like you keep yourself alive. I was also a medic, so that helped a lot. Like I was keeping my friends alive. They were staying with me, and we were getting objectives done. And I knew that it was the right thing to do because the commander told me it was the right thing to do.
Do you have that reassurance that it's not for nothing?
Yeah.
It's the section editor of war.
Man, it makes so much sense.
It all comes clicking into place. I'd like someone to reclaim that idea a bit, because it feels like it has loads of potential. It doesn't seem like it's going to be totally inaccessible. Maybe it's the notion that you have one player who has a very different experience to everyone else is the thing that doesn't appeal. But
yeah, I think a lot of these modes tend to get scrapped because one player has a big influence on the fun for everyone else. If they turn out to be a troll, or turn out to be a jerk, or just really incompetent, they can mess it up.
In many ways, this is just the problem with hierarchical leadership structures.
Yeah. But with rating systems like the one Dota has that are much more sophisticated than what we used to have, it feels like you could have someone could be recommended as a good commander, and whoever has the most recommendations as commander would be commander. So a troll wouldn't kind of get in that position.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, everything like that can be gamed, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I mean, I suppose, it'd be interesting to like, you have a pre-game election where you have to make your bid to the people who are about to be your team. Like a hustler.
And you can only finance it with microtransactions.
Exactly. You can pledge a certain amount of hats or something. Anyone who signs up for your
5 hats for every man who votes.
That's a terrible idea as well.
We've ruined video games.
Yep. Well, anyway, so on that subject, maybe, I don't know. So I don't really fully understand what's going on with Minecraft.
I have read, I think, most of the posts about this, which is a level of authority that we rarely achieve in this podcast. Microsoft announced the Minecraft Marketplace, which is a sort of in-game purchase store where you can buy user-made content that Microsoft have approved and sort of taken on board for sale. And you buy them with Minecraft coins, which are a lot like Microsoft points. And just like Microsoft points, everything is, you can only buy them in bundles of like 840 or 520. So no one really knows what the true cost of them are, because they make the head maths intentionally hard to do. And then the things cost like 320 points. And it's like, oh, what is that in real money? But it's something like things cost about $5 or I don't know. That was the example I saw. And a chunk of that goes to the person who made it, which is potentially positive. Like there's amazing creativity in the Minecraft world. I always basically thought that paid mods were a good idea, or a promising idea. I like the idea that people who put a huge amount of work into this stuff can be rewarded for it. I think that's partly why we've kind of seen a huge shift from mods to indie games. When I started on PC Gamer, the huge cultural thing that was happening was mods. It wasn't indie games. Who weren't making new games from scratch, they were making mods. And then once indie games came along, it was like, oh, you can make money from those things. And I think that's why that shift has happened. If there was a legal way to make money from making stuff for other games, then I think it really would increase how much of that stuff we see. Not that you need to increase it with Minecraft, because obviously it's already every incredible thing you can ever dream has already been made 10 times over. But the thing that struck me as a bit sleazy was, I don't know, not sleazy, just unfortunate wording, where in the announcement post it says that it's super important to us that creators get the biggest share after the 30% that the platform holder takes. And of course, Minecraft is I think it's on iOS, right? And so that 30% would be Apple in that case. And then Microsoft would take some chunk of the remaining money, and they don't say what the percentage is, but at least 50% would go to the creator. But then also Minecraft is sold on Windows 10 and on Windows phones, in which case the 30% is going to Microsoft. So if the split after the 30% is 49-51 or whatever, and then Microsoft are also taking 30%, that actually leaves Microsoft with the majority of the money. So maybe don't make such a big deal of it's so important to us so the creators get more of the money, and except in the circumstances where we take more of the money.
Yeah, man.
But they don't say the percentage, so I don't actually know it. I mean, the way they phrase it makes it pretty clear that it must the creator's cut of the total price must be less than 50%, because otherwise they wouldn't have to caveat it by saying the store holder takes 30% first and then the creator gets the majority of the rest. So that makes me think that in cases where Microsoft is the platform holder, they are taking the majority. But that said, I mean, that's just a language thing really, because when Valve and Bethesda did this, the cut for the modder was 25%, which is nowhere near a majority, even after the 30%. So it's, from what they say, if that is true, which I assume it is, it's more generous to creators than Valve's thing, and Bethesda's thing.
Is there demand for this? This is the thing I was thinking about, because Minecraft's audience is very young for the most part, right? Like, and given that it's already a game about making whatever you want and has a very, very long and deep modding history and history of free things, I was going to say, will anyone spend a $5 for a Minecraft add-on? Maybe just inevitably they will. Like,
I think there are kind of like superstar creators. I don't know who they are, but I think there are people who, if you're a Minecraft fan, and there's so many different kinds of Minecraft fan, I guess, but if you're a Minecraft fan who likes creations, who likes downloading crazy worlds and stuff, there are people out there who just churn out amazing stuff all the time. And if one of those says, oh, my next world costs $5, I'm sure there are loads of people who are like, okay, fine.
Yeah, you're probably right. Like, I'm fully ready to be wrong, but it's still the thought that occurs to me, I guess, is...
Yeah, I mean, it's... yeah, I can see the other side of it, which is I can't imagine anyone in the world is sitting there thinking, when are people going to make amazing things from Minecraft?
Yeah, exactly.
If only someone encouraged that community. Why don't they get off their asses and do cool stuff?
Isn't the store only on Windows 10?
I think Windows 10 and Pocket Edition.
So you've got a Java edition that has an almost unlimited supply of mods you can get totally for free.
Yeah, so actually, I'm a bit out of date with this. If you are playing the Java edition, is that still getting updated? Like if they patched it recently.
Good question.
They patched Minecraft recently. By Minecraft, did they mean just the Windows edition, or is it all...
It almost doesn't matter at this point, because there are so many mods. You can do anything you want in that edition of the game, even if it hasn't received the very latest update from Mojang.
I mean, this is pointless to say because I don't know, but I think
Never stopped us before, Tom.
I think they're still updating the Java version. I think like
so
they
as
have
well,
made some things exclusive to the Windows version, but it's not like the content is only going to the Windows version. I think it's...
So, I mean, it's an understandable move on Microsoft's part, but completely pointless for this game, where there's just a vast, huge pre-existing community of free mods. The
thing that makes me kind of a bit positive about it is that I just remember when I was in sixth form, me and a friend were trying to make a Quake 2 expansion pack, despite the fact that we were not id. We were aware we weren't id. But for some reason we thought we could just make an expansion pack to that game and sell it. And we couldn't, it turns out, for all the obvious reasons. But like, I don't know, as a hobby project, if it was just been a free mod, I don't think we would have got anywhere with it. It was kind of a thing where we're somewhat interested in it, but we weren't doing it to kind of really like sharpen our skills for future jobs. It was much more about like, this one thing was exciting to us and then it got way more exciting. We thought, oh my God, if we could sell this and then if, like this could actually be a career. And that made such a difference to our motivation to do it. And I'm imagining just kids out there who are, I mean, I say kids, like anyone under 35, who are, who can kind of justify investing more of their time in this stuff and getting really enthusiastic about it if it's something that could eventually lead to, maybe not a career, but at least like a part-time income. Like while they're at university, instead of doing a summer job, they can make a cool thing on Minecraft and get some money for it.
Yeah, I suppose having more ways to monetize something isn't necessarily like a bad thing, because it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of those kids don't aspire to be YouTubers, for example. Like if you're a teenager who's into Minecraft, I think it's a reasonable bet that you have some YouTubers and Twitch streamers that you like. Yeah. So I think maybe the difference is though that it feels like a closed ecosystem. It's not you can make a career in this. It's you can join this very specific marketplace to participate in a very specific way.
I just remember that, like, I went to Minecon one year, and the people you met there. First of all, if if any kids ask you who you are, the question they ask is, what's your channel? Like, they just assume to be a YouTuber. But we met a whole bunch of people there who, there are only a handful of indie devs, and everyone else were either Minecraft fans, but then the people who are kind of there to talk or to present something were all people who have careers in Minecraft. Like the guy who just made like a server browser thing, that's his entire career for the rest of his life now. And, you know, any kind of tools or anything. And these aren't things that they're selling for like a lot of money. It's like a voluntary donation, but the scale of it is so huge that they can make a living of it.
I was trying to figure out the other day, like what, because I don't know, maybe there is a word for this. So if we are millennials and the generation before us is Gen X.
I was shocked to discover I was a millennial. I always thought I was the generation after me, and then I read up on it and I was like, I'm in the catchment.
Yeah, you're in the catchment area for millennial. What's the generation after us? Because is it YouTubers?
I don't know. Is that a generation?
I don't know. Is it? Like, what is the word?
Didn't Google do an awful presentation recently or like a paper on cool? Like their paper was called It's Lit, and it was about the youth of today, and I think it was, I can't remember what letter it was. I want to say Generation Z, maybe?
Right.
Or Generation Z, as they would say.
In America. Yeah.
And it was about, I don't know, they had some quote from a supposed real 17-year-old of flesh and blood saying, to me, cool is brands that have interesting products and unique ideas. Oh my God.
Yeah, we all get into some weird shit when we're teenagers. Like everyone, that's just a phase. Like,
and also suspiciously in this Google driven research, the number one coolest brand was YouTube, which is not 100% impossible. But then like number 3 coolest brand was Google. And then like, is it really? Do people really think Google is cool?
I mean, presumably if you are 17, you've never known a search engine that wasn't Google.
But yeah, and so it's not cool, right? It's like Hoovers aren't cool.
Yeah, Sainsbury's. It's not like
I love the idea of these hipster millennials still on Ask Jeeves.
Yeah. It's like whatever.
So that's the real cool.
Yeah,
man.
getting into your dad's collection of vintage search engines. But you feel quite sorry for the kid at school who bings everything.
There's always one.
I feel sorry for Siri every time I ask her a question and she doesn't know it, so she tries to search for it, but she has to use Bing, and Bing just doesn't know anything.
Bing, we don't know anything.
It was like literally like how long does it take to fly from New York to Miami, which is such a sort of stereotypical question you ask your phone. Like they use that in adverts. So
that's like,
I don't know, I gotta Google it. Oh, I can't Google it, I gotta Bing it. Bing's like, I don't know.
Just stop talking to me.
Bing, it's just a text box. You can press enter if you like, but we don't know what will happen.
Bring back Jeeves, that's why.
Yeah, what happened to Jeeves? We could ask.
We asked him one too many questions.
Yeah.
What else is new? Oh yeah, so news segueing into, I guess, things we've been playing is Bayonetta suddenly came out on PC today.
Was that? Did anyone know that was happening?
People the press did were told ahead of time.
Might have done, but like, yeah, it was very like, I think they, from a public point of view, they just did it.
Just popped it out there, which I love. I love that idea that you just, there's no 6 month of, trailers all teasing. There was a little April Fool's tease for this one.
Oh yeah, that like 8-bit Bayonetta.
Yeah, and that was...
And they actually released that, right? That was
that's a cool thing.
I was refreshing your scene today, waiting for it to go up, and 8-bit Bayonetta comes up every time. So, for people who haven't heard of it, because it was a console game from several years ago, Bayonetta was... what year was Bayonetta? Was it like 2010? 11?
I do not know.
I don't know. Basically, a long ago past game on the computer console game machine by Platinum, who are responsible for games like Vanquish and Metal Gear Revengeance and many other beloved character action games.
Near Automatus Combat.
And it's just come out on PC with sort of support for modern resolutions. It obviously, it is on older technology, but the nice thing about that is it means it runs amazingly. I was playing it today at 1440p, and it's great because the art direction of that game has stood up regardless.
Awesome.
But and they've released it for £15, which is perfect.
Yeah,
I was kind of like, as soon as I realized it was today, I was ready to spend £40 because I had the realization, I guess it's kind of one of the things I've been playing today. I had the realization, starting up again today, even though it's a game I played loads of on Xbox, that I think Bayonetta is in my top 5 games of all time. I think genuinely it is a full, like, all-time best game for me.
I'm really glad it happened, because I'm really glad it happened, and I'm also really glad it's 15 quid, because there's a strong possibility that this genre is not for me, but I've heard so many good things about this particular game that I wanted to try it. And if it was 40 quid, I'd be like, maybe someday. Because it's 15, I'm just going to buy it. I'm just going to.
Yeah, and so it is in a genre that's known for being really hardcore, because it's by like the people who made Devil May Cry. And the way I would explain Bayonetta to people, because it is its own, very much its own thing. I appreciate when we danced around it a bit. So it's in the same. It is a bit like the subsequent Ninja Theory DMC was a extrapolation of Devil May Cry into a new form, and DMC didn't ground it because it's still a game about, crazy high concept monsters and combos and sword play and crazy weapons and mythology and things like that. But it applied sort of like contemporary, DMC applied contemporary fashion to Devil May Cry, which made it less over the top in some ways, right? Less sort of cartoonish. I mean, it's hard to draw that line specifically. It's cooler. Bayonetta is like kind of madder and camper in every possible way. Like Devil May Cry was always camp, like it was always high camp, but it was not knowingly so necessarily. Or if it was, maybe it was actually, because that seems to always had a sense of humor. It made a show taking its own mythology very, very seriously, and that's one of the things that made it funny, because it was taking itself very seriously, but it was ridiculous. Bayonetta is the most, like, joyously daft, but also amazingly detailed and internally consistent game. So, it is hard to explain almost anything about how that world fits together, because it's essentially like a sort of camp goth kink opera starring Bondage Mary Poppins, where you are a witch with guns attached to her hands and stiletto heels, who has to keep killing angel birds that explode into a shower of gore and rings from Sonic the Hedgehog when they die, or else she'll be dragged back into hell. And that's the basic premise, but every single, honest to God, I would argue that the first hour of Bayonetta has more like wit and ideas in it than some genres, I suspect. Like it's got, there's just a lot going on in like every single frame of that game. Like I replayed the first hour today. Like the first sequence in Bayonetta has you falling with another witch from the moon on a giant broken off clock tower while a voiceover explains that functionally, it's set in Europe. It's set in the mythical land of Europe. Well, that functionally World War II happened because some witches got into a fight with each other. Maybe that seems to be the implicit kind of what happened to Europe in this particular world. This is explained to you in a very serious voiceover as you fall out of space on a clock tower while fighting these sort of winged angel creatures. At which point, and also a 2-headed dragon that also has a giant upside down baby's face for a chest. And then that clock tower hits a cliffside, explodes in a huge explosion for no reason, even though it's just a medieval clock tower. And inside it is a smaller clock tower, which you can, and that is sequence 1. And sequence 2 is completely detached from that. It then cuts to a graveyard where a character is pissing on the grave of the lead designer of the game. And this is the first 10 minutes, and then by the end of the first hour, you're like, summoning a dragon made out of your own hair through a portal to drag a giant cherub monster baby, screaming into a wall where it gets smashed to death, and then you eat it with your hair and then claim butterfly lollipop. Okay. And yeah, it sort of fails spectacularly to explain why it's as good as it is. I think it's because in some ways, it's like the most excessive video game you've ever seen, particularly from that tradition of like every character being hypersexualized and every situation being kind of completely over the top. but it embraces the hyper. It's weirdly intelligent with how it embraces the hypersexualization of every aspect of that sort of genre. Like, apart from the one kind of comic relief character in the first bit, everyone is talking like they're in a porno, and it's kind of deliberate, like, and kind of not. But you're so ready to think that games are unwittingly wandering into daft territory that the games always do camp by accident. That when games go full Rocky Horror, like, on purpose, people almost aren't ready for it. Like, they're kind of willing to go like, oh god, another game has accidentally made everything sound like the opening to a porn. But Bayonetta is just that on purpose. Like, and it's just a string of non sequiturs that bizarrely hold together, because for all of this, it has a strangely coherent metaphysics. Like, how heaven and hell and purgatory, which are the three kind of dimensions that you shift between as you fight angel babies, fit together, is actually strangely consistent and clever. And what that allows it to do is escalate this crazy, funny, sort of delirious stuff on top of a baseline that's actually quite well executed and well thought through in a way that is consistently surprising and has, like, a tremendous amount of wit. Like, just the cinematography of it is phenomenal. Like, the cutscenes are dated a bit because it's an older engine, but, like, basically nothing is an accident. Like, it's amazingly well staged, deeply fucking strange. Like, every single shot of it is weird, but I don't think there's, like, a wasted second in that game. Like, and then when you're in the game and you're doing the open world action stuff, and it's an amazingly deep combat system. It's hugely rich with upgrades and stuff you can find and stuff you can do. You can kill enemies to gain golden LPs that allow you to give them to a bartender that you know, who's also a demon, who goes down into hell, plays the album, which annoys some demons, then he kills the demons with his bare hands and comes back with a new gun. And he makes you a little cocktail.
I spend so much of my working life trying to figure out ways for, like, game mechanics to make sense. So it all seems wasted now.
Yeah, it's this is the weird thing, because it, like, the whole, like, little strange things. Like, the game has a strange fixation with Sonic the Hedgehog, which it never says out loud, because you're collecting halos from the angels you defeat, but they're rings from Sonic. Definitely. You're hunting down a missing gemstone called the Eye of the World, or one of the Eyes of the World. And it's a Chaos Emerald. Like, it just looks like a Chaos Emerald. At the beginning, Bayonetta is dressed like a nun, reading a sermon over the corpse of a criminal who's just died.
Like in Sonic.
Like, no, but the criminal's name is Eggman, and it is implicitly Robotnik. Yeah. Like, he has died and been buried in this, like, strange cemetery in New York. And she's dressed like a nun reading a sermon, and then the angels come down to collect him, but it's just it's a ruse so that she can trick some angels into coming down to collect this person's soul, so that she can, like, kick the shit out of all of the angels to an upbeat elevator music of Fly Me to the Moon. I genuinely love it. Like, the good thing about it as well is it has, like an easy, and I think it has a trivially easy difficulty mode, which allows you to kind of bypass what would traditionally be in the, I mean, I recommend if you're interested in these kinds of games to try it on normal, just to see how far you get with it. Cause, it is a really gratifying combat system in the Devil May Cry mode. There's loads of different weapons and combos to learn and unlock, and it's real silly. Like, you can, because you have guns on your heels, you can break dance in a kind of endless circle, spraying bullets in 360 degrees around you. It's amazing. And it's nice that it finding a home on PC gives me hope that the rest of Platinum's catalogue will, because I never played Bayonetta 2, which, given that the first one is legitimately one of my favourite games ever. Bayonetta 2 was only released on the Wii U.
Oh, wow.
Because it was part funded by Nintendo, which is a weird choice for them, because it is the most sort of unheimlichly un-Nintendo game you've ever seen. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe, I think Platinum have said that they would love to release more of their games on PC, but it's at the publisher's behest. But who knows? It would be a genuine treat. So yeah, it has my absolute recommendation. But I suppose the only thing I'd say about it is going to be an acquired taste, because it is really, really weird. It feels like it's gaming's Rocky Horror Picture Show, I think would probably be the way I'd put it. Like, for people who love it, like, I would genuinely go to, like, a sing-along screening of Bayonetta. I think.
Well, it sounds good to me. Look, my main concern really was that, like, I knew it was a sort of action game with a lot of, like, skill to it, and so the most likely cause of me bouncing off it would be that it was too hard. So if there's a trivial difficulty, I want to see cool monsters, and if it's fun to interact with, then I'll...
Yeah, and there's so many little animations that are just incredible. Like, you have, if you fill up your combo meter, it's a little bit like, it's more technical, but it's a little bit like the Batman games in that if you fill up your combo meter by not getting hit and continuing to hit enemies, you can do, like, a guaranteed takedown. Which, in a Batman game would be doing a forward roll at somebody and then breaking their leg.
Yeah.
In Bayonetta, she sort of summons, like, a medieval torture device, like either a guillotine or a rack or
Iron Maiden.
An Iron Maiden, which she kicks them into, and then you hammer a button to change to increase the gigatonnage of the amount of pressure it applies of the punishment, because there's a
gigatonnage of the medieval torture
of the punishment, which can sometimes involve spanking and kind of like stuff like that, and the more gigatonnage you get out of it, the more points you get, which will give you your reward at the end. And then at later stages they get weird. Those torture devices get, like, there's a type of angel that you stick them on a vibrating wooden horse, shall we say, and they have such a good time they blow up.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's great.
So did you guys see the special move of the Flash in the DC?
I did, yeah, in
beat-em-up
Injustice
game?
2.
I only watched this because Dan Marshall was tweeting about it, and he was tweeting his idea for a time traveling move, and his idea was you go back in time and punch them when they're a baby. But the Flash, like any fast superhero, can go back in time, apparently. And because Dan was suggesting this as a better way to use time travel, I was very intrigued to see how have they used time travel for a special move as a fighting game character. And I'm ready for it to be dumb, but I wasn't ready for how dumb it is. But it was so dumb I kind of loved it, which is, he like grabs them and then takes them back in time to ancient Egypt and punches them into like
a sphinx,
and then takes them back to the dinosaurs and punches them into a T-Rex, and then takes them back to the present and punches them into themselves.
Yeah, he smacks them with themselves just before, because then he smacks them into themselves, and then himself from the past takes the other one and takes them into the past.
Perfect.
Yeah, that is probably the best, like, ultimate move I've seen in Injustice 2 so far. The first one had stupid, I think Lex Luthor could punch someone through the moon, which, there's a lot of things that would definitely kill Batman in that game. Where it's like, if it's Superman fighting Zod, it's like, okay, fine, I can understand this would possibly happen, but yeah, there's basically no, well,
punch Batman through the moon. It's a one-way ticket.
Yeah, like, well, I mean, like, there's what you can feel, like, I mean, the Joker is a character in that, and like the Joker is just a very clever man. Like, there's not like a special resilience to the moon there necessarily. That comes with having
plus
a sense
25% moon resist.
Exactly. Tom, you played a little bit of Bayonetta today, did you not?
I did. I played a few, probably the first 2 hours many years ago on the PS3, I think. Was it on PS3? On that generation anyway. And really, really enjoyed it. And I think I was borrowing a copy, so I couldn't finish it, but I was always resolved to buy it. And now the time has come that I finally, because I love that type of game as well. I love Devil May Cry, and I love DMC. So for something to come out of this lineage and be so just singular, and it's so funny. It's got such a great sense of humor, I think, just relentlessly silly and just dopey and playful. So I'm absolutely loving it so far, and absolutely gonna polish it to perfection to complete it all.
Have you managed to like remain unspoiled on it over the years?
Yeah, so I don't really know what happens in that game.
Yeah, like don't like, if you get stuck, I'd even avoid looking stuff up. This might be a PSA for people, because like, I think ages ago we got a question on this podcast, or maybe even the PC Gamer podcast, about like which games do escalation well. And I love any game where you are genuinely surprised because you genuinely don't know what's going to happen next. And Bayonetta, I think, is still my like go-to example of like a game that never actually manages it. So yeah, it starts with you falling on a giant clock tower out of the moon fighting a dragon, and it actually never stops escalating. But in an actual meaningful way, like beyond simply like it's a double dragon or it's 3 dragons. Like actually, like yeah, it's spectacular. I'm really excited to play through it again because it's such a brilliant self-contained thing. So yeah, I hope people get kicked out. The other thing I'd say about it is to finish off is like I can't think of almost any game where actually like because there's quite a lot of cutscenes in the opening. Might be the one thing that I imagine frustrates you about it, Tom, is that it gives you things to play with, but there are some long cutscenes at the beginning of Bayonetta. Not by like Metal Gear standards, it's not like a 40-minute cutscene, but certainly by action game standards, it makes you watch a daft cartoon for a while. But actually, and even though I played the game loads when it came out, watching it again, I'm getting new things out of those cutscenes, like little things you're noticing, like background details and things about the way the characters are standing and like little jokes that are hidden in the way in the back. Like every frame has something in it. And I can't really think of very many games, particularly games that have in-engine cutscenes, where the cutscenes themselves have that kind of craft. I mean, it's you're being made to watch a cartoon in the middle of your video game, but it's a genuinely funny cartoon, and funny because of the way that it is shot, which is a weird thing to say about, like, I don't think I can think of another video game that you would say that about necessarily. Really. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. It's great.
Sweet.
What have you been playing, Tom? I'm going to put that out there.
I've been playing mainly something I can't talk about, and the other thing is Bayonetta. So I really can't say anything. Otherwise I'll be shot.
So, I mean, you played a little bit of Bayonetta though, right, today?
I did. I played.
What were your feelings?
So it hits you with a lot of stuff very quickly in that game. I love it. It's hilarious. It's really, really funny. I think, I'm looking forward to seeing how the combat system evolves because, like, instinctively you sort of like start mashing in these games, and then you generally find a few combos that you like and you build on those as you sort of familiarize yourself with the combat system. So the experience I've had so far was finding a kind of one combo that kicks them up in the air, and I've suddenly learned that if I press the kick button while I'm in the air, she'll like do a cycling kick that will slam him into the ground. Then I press that button again and she slams down onto them with another kick. And that's really satisfying. So I found the cornerstone of the combat system that I'm going to like learn and build off as the game gets progressively more complicated. I absolutely love the dodge mechanic. So if you do a like really well-timed dodge, the whole game goes into slow motion. And it's such a powerful feeling because the feeling of movement and fluidity in that game is so exciting.
I think if it goes into witch time,
Which time?
which is definitely not bullet time.
So in which time you get to just do whatever you want to the enemies, and it's the sort of combat system where everything you do is kicking stuff up into the air. So there's like enemies flying around, flying away from you, charging towards you, and to suddenly go into slow motion and be able to manipulate that situation in that combat system is really fun, really, really satisfying. So I absolutely can't wait to master it rather than just be mashing. But it's already given me that little thing that I already enjoy doing.
How far are you?
I'm literally just in, I don't want to say where I'm fighting on, but after a couple of cutscenes in, and fighting with a friend.
Right.
And that, yeah.
You're in witch time.
I'm in witch time. It's teaching me witch time.
Yes, yeah.
And I love witch time, man. It's really good. And the game has so much more to teach me because I've not really gotten into the execution stuff properly yet. But yeah, it's going to be.
And the thing is, to be honest, actually, I feel like you could say where you were fighting there because the way I would sell people on the game is that, like we mentioned, you have a fight in the graveyard to amazing music. You fight your way down a falling clock tower. You are currently, I believe, fighting in a stopped time in plane crash as it happens.
Yeah, that's right. You're on
the
freeway. Yeah, that's right.
You're fighting on the wing of a cargo plane as it crashes into a freeway, but that crash has currently been time stopped. And you are fighting angels with medieval torture equipment as the explosion kind of hangs in place around you. It's fucking great.
It's a good time. It's a good time. I love it already. It's brilliant.
Yeah. And you're going to get a lot of flashbacks to mysterious witch things that make no sense.
Really?
Right. Apart from the fact they do.
There's a bit in Titanfall where you sort of jump into a frozen time explosion, right? And everything's like stuck in place and you can kind of jump.
It's like that, but with
debris.
like porn jazz. Oh, that's the other thing. When you go into bullet time, it's just lounge jazz.
Excellent.
It's so good. What have you been playing, Tom?
A few things. I just started Mass Effect Andromeda today. I've been saving it up. In retrospect, my logic does not make a lot of sense, but I wasn't playing it out in Seattle because I didn't have a good desktop gaming PC out there, and I didn't want to play it on my PS4 because I'm confident I would be happy playing all of this game on my PS4. But because of the way Mass Effect happened, it was a whole trilogy and you could import your save and stuff, and I wasn't confident I'd be able to do that cross-platform, and so I didn't want to commit to being PlayStation for the next 10 years or whatever it ends up being. And so I was waiting until I got home. Also, I just had a lot of things going on. So I finally started that today, and I actually didn't think the game had updated because I saw screenshots of the patch with the new eyes and the old eyes, and I played the game and it sure looked like the old eyes in the character creator. It really had this kind of flat, cartoony look of the eye is just completely white except for the iris. But it seems I do have the latest patch, and I went up to ultra on the graphic settings, and now it looks a bit better. But on the default settings it gave me, a lot of the faces look fucking horrific. There's looking for the female riders, and there's a kind of blonde-haired one with a bright pink face that just looks completely clownish and bizarre. And I'm sure it's all just kind of color toning and shaders and the sort of the final steps of rendering the thing. I think that there's a way to make that look good, but I've not done it. Anyway, I spent a while just making my character, and that game, I just thought of this when you were talking about long cutscenes in Bayonetta. The intro and the sort of opening stages, there's a huge long section where you just cannot pause it or do anything. Nothing works, no buttons do anything. And I was very painfully aware of this because I really need to put some broccoli on. Had some chicken in the oven, and if the broccoli didn't go on 15 minutes before the chicken's ready, the whole meal timing is screwed up. But I didn't want to miss this. It's kind of even though I've not heard great things about Andromeda, I'm still excited about a new Mass Effect game, and I'm still I want to be as immersed as I can be. But this broccoli needs to get cooked, man. I need to pause.
I don't want to tell you, man, everybody knows this. This is video games 101. Don't put broccoli on immediately before starting a RPG.
Yeah, and I knew I was going to spend a long time in character creator, but that's what I thought. I thought I'd spend so long in that I would still be in that when my broccoli was needed doing. Anyway, the character creation was important because I'd seen a lot of the default rider does not look good to me in a lot of the shots I've seen, and B, I knew from experience that my Shepard in Mass Effect is so soul-bound to Jennifer Hale's voice to the point where if I see anyone else's Shepard speaking those words, it's disgusting to me. I'm what is that? Why have you put that face on her? It's obviously not her. And so I knew whatever face I picked, it's going to be I haven't really heard a lot of Ryder's voice, and I wanted to make sure my association was bound to the appearance I picked. And so I've gone for an angry-looking Asian lady with she has a hairstyle that nearly covers one of her eyes, and then her, I think it's the eye that's nearly covered, has a kind of weird tattoo, a kind of a blood splat over it, and it's also red. And then her other eye has a scar on it, which is blood. And
that's a hardcore rider.
Yeah, she looks like trouble. And so I'm going to be interested to see how much the game lets me support that backstory. And also then it generates a sibling for you, and I went in to customize my sibling, and the one they picked for me did not look at all right for me, and I picked just one of the default ones. And I almost gave him the same tattoo. I went in and gave him the same tattoo and thought, oh, that's cool, we have matching tattoos. And then I thought, no, it's way more interesting if he's my sort of straight man brother. He's really by the book and boring, and I'm the kind of rebel one, and that we have this personality difference. So I'm also interested to see if I ever get to live that difference out. I have not played any of the game at all. I just literally, it's in the looking around tutorial. But I'm kind of excited to continue with that.
I mean, you and your sibling are twins, so if you had the same tattoo, they might be we're pushing it a bit.
Yeah, that's just weird. Maybe you should have the same scar and it should be a birthmark.
Yeah. I think from when you knife fought your way up.
We just stabbed each other in the eyes.
Exactly.
I had to restart the game to redesign my rider.
Oh, yeah.
Because it takes a long time in that game for you to enter direct sunlight, and that's the moment that makes or breaks your character.
Yeah, I had this with Dragon Age Inquisition. I think it didn't take too long to get to the point, but it was so different in game to the character creator that I had to restart like 7 times.
It's okay when you're in like soft light, like a spaceship or something, or
Yeah.
a dark.
That's
planet.
got me worried, because so far I'm happy with how she looks in game, but yeah, the tattoo is a risk, and the scar is, I'm trying to match 2 different color systems to make them look like they're the same thing, and anything could go
Anything
wrong.
could happen,
It's a high stakes game I'm playing.
So I ended
Also,
up
my
going,
lip gloss I'm not sure about.
I ended up going with the default male rider, who's actually a really good fit for the voice.
Oh, yeah.
And the voice is really good on him, actually. I like it. It's basically they've told someone to do a Nathan Fillion impression, and it's fine. It works really well.
Did you play a male shepherd?
I had a female shepherd.
Okay.
So I had Jennifer Hell's voice, who I just love that performance in that game. And so I decided to switch it up for Andromeda.
Just for a difference.
I really, really, for what it's worth, I really like Frida Wolf's performances, female rider. Did you go with the
So I
default
haven't
name?
actually really heard a lot of her voice in game so much, but I saw a kind of behind the scenes thing she did with I forget the guy, but the male actor as well, and she seemed really funny.
Yeah, I think you do have the option to be a more serious rider or a kind of threatening rider or whatever, but like I think it might have already happened, but like goofy female rider is, I think, one of the like fan beloved. Sort of moved into the same territory as Funny Hawk from Dragon Age 2.
Oh yeah.
Funny Hawk was just one of those sort of fan ideas that got picked up, because if you just kept picking the sarcastic options, Hawk is like the best character in the game. And Ryder is similar. Like, I really like that, because I made my female rider look kind of not normal, obviously, because space people, but like kind of, I always try and, me and lore. Like, I was like not really wearing any makeup. Like, just sort of looks like she's just being on a spaceship for, looks like an astronaut, right? Like, just look, and seeing her in the kind of like mad space armor towards the end of the game, but like kind of being kind of a dork about space things was really like, I really, really liked that character by the end of the game, and really had a strong sense of how she wasn't Shepard. Like a male Shepard, which was one of the reasons I switched it up, but also like, I'll remain one of that game's defenders, I think, but one of the things I think they did really well is establish a protagonist that is meaningfully different to their previous one, which is definitely a trick. Like, Ryder's a lot younger, and I think that's really a nice, again, talking about games that use cinematics properly, I think Andromeda is one of the only games I can think of where you can feel the age of a character relative to a different, because video game people are like all 30, right? Like, that's the, Shepard's 29 in Mass Effect 1, Ryder's 22 in Andromeda, and I felt that difference in a way that I don't think I have done in previous RPGs, where it doesn't feel like it matters. It's weird, because it lets you make Ryder look however the fuck you want. If you want to be like a grey-haired military veteran, then you're still just a 22-year-old grey-haired military veteran. But nonetheless, I'll be interested to see what you make of it, Tom, because my memories of my thoughts about it have only gotten fonder as time has gone on.
Cool. And then actually before that, I played Signal from Tolva, which I'd been looking forward to for a
I've
while.
been playing a lot of Signal from Tolva myself.
I now remember playing that. So Chris asked me earlier, what have you been playing? I failed to register.
Not talk about Signal from Tolva.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. I'm enjoying it so far. I've conquered about like 4 bunkers. And actually the one I'm trying to conquer at the moment, I don't know what I'm missing, but I can't seem to like capture it. Thanks. I kill all the enemies that I can find, and there's one of those drop pods. And when I kill all the enemies, it doesn't liberate. And then if I just wait long enough, they spawn more enemies, and I can kill those too. But I can't figure out what will make it trigger. And if it was my first bunker, I'd think I was missing like a fundamental mechanic. But I've liberated like 3 of them. I keep saying liberated because that's what it's called in Heat Signature. Captured is what everyone else calls it. I just use Newspeak to make it sound like a good thing. Anyway, that's where I am at the moment. But I really like how there's a bunch of things I like. One is it's really clear to me what all of the nodes on the map, it's really clear to me what I get for doing them. Like, if I capture this beacon, it's a spawn point, and I can spawn there. If I capture this bunker, I can change my loadout there and everything. If I investigate this signal, I will unlock new kit and level up. If I resolve this ambush, for some reason I heal faster, which is, I don't know why that happens, but I did not need to know as a player at all. I was like, okay, cool, I know what I get for doing that, which again made me question how much of my working life I spend trying to rationalize game mechanics. And another thing I like is the combat is, I kind of like the feel of the weapons mostly. It's pretty straightforward, and I haven't found any interesting weapons, I wouldn't say. Everything fires in a straight line at the enemy at various rates and at various damage amounts. But that's the only kind of weapon I've found so far that I've unlocked. But the thing I do like is that the shield mechanic is, like, it's not radically different to how other games work, but it's just, I don't think I've ever seen this exact mechanic, which is you can press a button to toggle your shield on or off. While it's on, you take dramatically less damage. It drains a bit over time, and it also drains when you get hit. And it also recharges when it's off, even if it isn't completely depleted. And so it basically just becomes a kind of button that you just... It's a way to reward you for knowing you're going to take damage. If you know you're going to take damage, turn on your shield. Then when you take the damage, you take much less damage. And if you don't know you're going to take damage, then you take more. And just like a little kind of mini game of just figuring out, I think I'm about to get hit. I'm just going to show the game. I know I'm about to get hit. And I get kind of credit for that. And that actually makes, I think the situations that helps in, are exactly the situations that I find most awkward and unrewarding in games where, I'm always trying to do the stealthy thing and I'm always trying to ambush people, and then every now and then it goes wrong and I get cornered, and Tolva lets me say, look, I know I fucked up. I know there's going to be trouble. Let me mitigate that a bit, and then I'll do that fight, and lets you feel like a bit more intelligent about the messiest parts of combat. I also... You have like an area effect ability, and I saw there's one that has an eye with a line through it, which immediately appeals to me as a stealth player. But I couldn't help thinking that the one next to it seemed way better, which is all enemies in the radius, instead of their sensors being scrambled or something, they just run away.
Yeah, that's what I'm
using that as well.
So I took that, and
it's really good.
It's really good.
You've got a little sniper
Particularly
rifle.
because I'm mostly using sniper rifles, so it's like they're getting
too.
close, then they run away, and now I just shoot you in the back while you're running away.
Like a total.
We were all playing Single from Dogger in the same way.
Yep. I really like, the thing it shares with Stalker is that thing of just hearing distant gunfire. I mean, something's going on. And then you go over and you find out what's going on, and it's two factions fighting.
Gunfire. It turns out.
Turns out people shooting each other. Robots shooting each other.
One day we'll find the fireworks show.
And I like that. I had one good experience early on with like one faction fighting the other. It was a thing where I just encountered these red guys who were tougher than everything else I'd fought, and a bunch of them were attacking me, and then I realized, a blue guy's also attacking me, and then I realized, if I hide behind this rock, neither of those people can see me, but they can see each other, and eventually they'll kind of start to attack each other, and they did, and that was really fun. That was just once, and since then, every time I've been in that situation, I'll like hide behind the rock, and then they both just kind of chase me down. Like one of them runs all the way to me and attacks me directly, and then even if I can see the other one, they just attack me directly as well, and they ignore each other. So I don't know what the logic is there exactly. I feel like that is the sort of almost like the central feature of the game is factions fighting each other. Like that's the stalkerishness about it, and that's the thing that distinguishes it from just a
open world shooter.
A very standard open world game, yeah. And so if it were me, I would kind of bias it to make them fight each other more than they fight you, or sort of prioritize each other. I had a really stupid situation where like this guy was attacking me. It was I can't remember what they're called. There's bandits, and then what were the red
bandits
guys?
And zealots.
Zealots, yeah. So Zealot was attacking me, and he was quite tough, and I was in a bad way, and I was also hiding from a bunch of bandits and a bandit like turret pod thing, and so I hid in such a way that like the Zealot would have to walk past the turret pod to get to me. And the turret pod is like fucking, it warms up and it flashes with lights, and then it just slams down like 7 missiles in rapid fire if it sees you. And it saw the Zealot, and it did that to him. And he just crouched there, just constantly shooting at me in my direction, ignoring that. In fairness,
he really hates you, man.
I don't think he can damage that thing, so maybe he knew that and so wasn't prioritizing it, but he didn't try and get out of the way either. And that had that moment of like, it's not a systemic world where everyone fights each other organically depending on their priorities. It's a world where everyone hates me. But that may have just been coincidence. It may have just been like they have a chance to pick a target. And
on the last episode, actually, I played a little bit of Tolver rezzed last week, basically before getting the final game, and I think I was wrong about the way I thought. I was definitely wrong about the way I thought factions factored into the game. Like, I assumed that you would have more choice about like which particular part of the conflict you choose to support or massage in a given area, where it is more the case that there are the surveyor robots that will always like you and can be turned to your side and brought with you as allies. And then there are multiple factions of enemies that you will sometimes encounter fighting each other. And because you're right, the game is so much about the way those factions interact. I don't know if it would benefit from almost always being neutral to the factions until you attack, until you need something they have. Like, it's sort of interesting. Like, I found myself, like, just sort of killing on sight most of the enemies, which I'm enjoying because it's a nice world to inhabit, and I actually really like the combat, weirdly. It's not the most radical shooter ever made, but there's something gratifying about the shield mechanic and how active that feels. And
there's some, I think there's some really basic things it does very well with the combat, particularly with the sound design of making it. It's a bit like popping bubble wrap, both with the way that the guns sound and also the ways the enemies pop. Which is,
I like that they explode on death.
That's really reactive, really responsive. And I always look for a good death response from my enemies in games. I think it really sells the impact of your weapons, and Tolver does that really well.
It's funny, I really love reverse engineering what tests were like for the game, and I might be totally wrong, but the first weapon I had, I was shooting people and I just wanted to know, like, am I hitting them? I can't tell if I'm hitting them. And then later on, I was shooting them with a different weapon and I realized, oh, there's a giant word that says hit every time you hit them. And I realized, I'm sure they had a test, at least one tester is like, I can't tell if I'm hitting anything. And they thought, oh, can we do some effect? And they maybe tried some effects and they weren't clear enough. And they thought, let's just have a giant fucking word that tells you hit them.
Yeah, loads of shooters have done that in the last sort of decade. I've noticed, like, the
reticle marker.
The reticle, like, will give you a little sting to let you know you've hit something, which for some reason, even though it's not realistic, feels really good.
It was also making me laugh because I had been doing testing with heat signature recently, and I've had so many people suggest features that are already in there. I'll say like, oh, there should be a full screen effect when you go into slow-mo. There is. There should be this. There is. And there should be a button that does this. There is. And it amused me that playing Tolver, I'm like, oh, there should be some kind of indicator that you hit someone. It fucking says hit in giant red letters.
So, I mean, I do really like the interface, partly because I think, I think it's a big step up for those guys generally. Like, I think, So You're Being Hunted had quite like a rudimentary feeling UI in some ways, and this feels much more incorporated into the world. But I actually like that they've gone for your gun sight flashes up the word hit rather than, I think only the sniper rifles do that as well, rather than it being like a reticle bloom or a kind of, the Call of Duty or Battlefield style thing. Because everything in that game world, one of the things I really like about it, feels like a device. Like there's quite, even though they're sort of laser weapons and your movement is, you are a robot that you've just beamed into and will dispose just as easily. There's quite a nice physicality to everything in the game, which I think maybe is the thing I'm kind of getting out of it. Like, the sprint animation is real weird. Like, it pays attention to the fact that you are not a human sprinting. You're a
lope.
You're
loping,
boingy, lopey robot.
Gazelle or something, yeah.
And, the jump is similar when you use it says like press Z for flashlight kind of thing, and it's not a flashlight, it's your headlamps basically on because you're a robot and you have two of them because you're a
I like those because I just made my eyes glowing like
exactly
like an Iron Giant
Battle Wally.
I love that you have like
because you're a robot.
I love that you've got fog lights as well, so you've got the minor lights, or if you don't want to blind the robots, then you switch it up.
I assumed that drained some kind of like energy meter when I first did it, but no, it's just bad road manners.
That's what it is.
You have to dip your beams as you go over a hill.
I also want to give a shout out to the sound effects for that light, because they have 3 different sound effects, like one for turn on low beam, turn on high beam, and then turn off entirely, and they all sound really good.
There's loads of nice little touches to it. I love the UI, the kind of flashing green notifications you get when you're kind of scanning stuff. That that always all feels really good. For me, like a lot of the game is very atmospheric, but I find actually traversing the environments slightly dull because it's arranged into lots of sort of corridor long corridors basically, and then there'll be combat encounters. And the stuff I love about it, like I love that they just give you an enormous crashed vessel on the horizon, which like says so much about the setting of the game and says so much about the mood. But you are in a giant sort of rocky corridor other than that. That's probably the biggest problem I'm having. So when I see an objective marker, it's miles away. I'm like, do I really want to do that? Because when I have encounter other robots and get into combat, I enjoy it. But it's the kind of the hiking that I'm not enjoying so much at the moment.
I think I noticed that it does quite a lot with hills. Like almost everything is an incline or a decline. Two kinds of hill. I think maybe to break up the corridoriness of it. I think if it was flat, you'd feel it even more than you do.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I don't think it's entirely successful, but I noticed that, like, man, I'm going up a really steep hill, and games very rarely take you up just like a really steep hill that leads you to a flat place. You know what I mean? Not specifically going over something. It definitely, like, I really like it. I think it definitely feels like sort of Stalker light, if you know what I mean. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because Stalker is a very heavy going game in some ways, and it's quite daunting, whereas this feels kind of nicely accessible. Like, it feels like that experience of exploring an open world and having these like sort of like quite tense firefights and solving, encountering some anomaly or finding some salvage or solving a puzzle or whatever it is, but broken down into these kind of compartmentalized chunks that fit easily into a kind of shorter play session. It feels a bit more manageable. Like it's tuned for the type of amount of time that I feel that I can now invest in a game. Whereas I think the games that have influenced it, specifically Stalker, were from an era that demanded a lot more time. So that's a good thing, but it also means that it doesn't necessarily feel like it has the longevity or the sort of enduring depth of a game with that level of detail.
I was looking at the weapon unlock menu, and so far I've been really liking how the pace at which I'm unlocking stuff, which is pretty fast. But just looking at the icons, it looks like I've got one of all the icon types already, and so I think the other ones are just better versions of what I have. Or like the differences are interesting in a sniper rifle. I have opinions about whether I want a better scope or slightly more damage, or whether I want like less drain on the clip. But I was kind of hoping for like shotguns and grenade launchers. And I haven't found those yet, and I don't think I'm going to.
It's interesting seeing, like, because obviously the signal from Tolva, if you didn't know this already, is by Big Robot and Jim Rossignol, who is a friend. So, I guess we should probably disclose that it's Jim's game.
Yes.
But it's interesting seeing, I don't know if you'd, like, I think this is true of whenever you play the work of somebody whose tastes well as a person, you notice things you might not otherwise notice. But I think more so even than Sawyer being hunted, it feels like the expression of a bunch of Jim's interests specifically. I don't want to speak for him, but like, the bunkers you unlock that have like the sort of spawn pads for the robots, and then the terminal that you access to upgrade your gear and hand in data that you found in the wilderness, that kind of thing. They are the towers from PlanetSide. And totally are, like the layout of those internal. They're a lot like either bases from tribes, or as an inheritance from tribes. Those towers in PlanetSide, those sort of spawn rooms with the sort of cylindrical spawn spawn tubes and the equipment terminals. And I was like,
having not played PlanetSide, it reminded me of Tribes.
Yeah, but it's that sort of like. It feels, I think, as a consequence of that and the sort of retro computer look of things, so all the interfaces, it's not futuristic robots. It's old school futuristic robots.
And then the sort of look of the bunkers themselves is like that brutalist architecture that, I can't remember the name of it, but there's that architecture blog that Jim is always retweeting.
Building blog.
Yeah. Building blog.
Blog.
Roberts.
Building blog robot. It feels like a sort of summation of those things, but also I think as a consequence of all those things, it feels quite not retro, but retro in a sense that kids might understand retro now, as in PC games from the late 90s, early 90s, like that kind of era of shooter, just in the way the landscapes look and the kind of the text, like the color schemes and things, and it, like, I think at its best, it looks like those pieces of sci-fi concept art that we would probably pass around in a chat channel because, that's the kind of thing we're into. But yeah, so far I'm enjoying it. Also, it also continues Jim's love, apparently, for robots that speak like... I found have you found one of the little ball things that rolls around scanning?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're extremely...
I couldn't find anything to do with them except shoot them. I was hoping
I
to,
didn't shoot it. I didn't want to shoot it because it's just a little like...
Well, I ran out of verbs. That's all I had left.
Because it sort of seems like it's saying hello, and it's a little scanner robot that rolls around. It looks like a dice, basically. It looks like a D20 that just sort of rolls around and babbles.
Actually, the first time I saw one of those, I thought it was a clever mechanic because it was right on the fringe of the radioactive territory, and I didn't have a hazmat suit yet, and I was in a collecting anomalous materials kind of, not mission exactly, but event, and I had all but one of them. And then I saw this object that looked like a collectible, but it was rolling into the radiation zone. And I'm like, oh, do I have to like run in and nab it and run back out again? But while I was thinking that, I died because I didn't know I was already in the radiation zone. And the damage indicator was not bright enough for me to realize.
We are a robot. How are you going to tell?
Yeah. In fact, yeah, I would almost have assumed I could have survived the radiation zone, except that I'd already been to the equipment loadout thing, and it's got a whole section for hazmat suits. And I'm like, I don't have any of those.
Yeah, it's cool. And again, £15.
Have you read any of the text?
All of it.
Really?
Tom, it's me.
Oh yeah, of course. I forgot I was talking. Because for me, it like you scan these things in the world, and it says, "Oh, entry added to the log." And for a while, I thought that you had to be at a bunker to access those things. Turns out you don't.
Oh, I thought that as well, and I've read it all.
Okay. And for me, that disconnect of like, I scanned it now, but I got to read it later, that kind of killed it for me. Like I would read the text if it was popping up on my screen right now, but because it wasn't, I didn't. And now that I've discovered I can read it right now, it's a bunch of buttons. I think you have to go into the map and then press another button and then you get to the lore screen. And so I haven't been doing it.
Yeah, I appreciate the world building. Actually, I think it's very light touch world building, which I appreciate because it is just like I don't really know what's going on yet.
The intro is so it's short and to the point, which I like. But there is no way to do an intro to this game that does not involve someone saying, "Oh, it's a signal and it's from Tolva." Like, they have to get those words in, and in a short space of time, it's always going to feel like they're saying the title.
Each sort of new codex entry thing you unlock is a signal from Tolva, and I realized looking down at the list that I had this thing that said like 6 of 60 signals unlocked, and it's like you really should have killed this game 60 signals from Tolva. Like 50 Flights of Loving or something.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, I suppose there is one big signal from Tolva that you're looking for, but,
Gotta get that big signal.
you gotta get that, that's what you're there for, the big signal. It's just big signals. It reminds me, like, the sort of the sci-fi side of it, as you are maybe a person, maybe an AI beaming into the bodies of surveyor robots that are maybe there for some reason. It's a bit, Ian M. Banksy, like not in the depth of it, but in the sort of the aesthetic of it. Like it feels like technology is so advanced that sort of nothing kind of has any. When I say it has no consequence, I don't mean in a bad way. It just sort of, it's that sort of heady sort of sci-fi where a small thing like getting shot with a gun and blowing up is no hindrance to an unchecked AI that can do whatever it wants. It wouldn't surprise me if the twist was you turn out to be a spaceship that is just sitting in orbit. Having feelings about robots. About robots.
Robot feelings.
Exactly.
I really like the extremely efficient bit of HUD in the bottom right-hand corner that is 3 different icons. One is for loot, one is for data bits, and one is for signals. And they're just 3 little squares, and they can fill up to varying degrees. And that just represents your proximity to any of those things. So if they're all blank, there's none of those things near. If you see one of them like have like 1 bar in it, there's something somewhat nearby. And then as you walk around, it's a bit like Far Cry 2 and the beeping diamond detector. You know whether you're getting closer or further away, and then because it covers all 3 kinds of things, you know what kind of thing you're approaching and whether you care about it. That's quite neat.
Because I'm an idiot, there's a thing in the bottom left of the screen that tells you your current rank, which is basically your level. And you begin at level 0. And because each bot in the world and each bot that you could potentially take over and be has a randomly generated name, I thought for the first part of the game that my name was RANK0.
Oh, God, old RANK0 the Robert.
Yeah, exactly. RANK0 the Robert. I was RANK0 the Robert, and then I was like, oh, what a great randomly generated name I have. Like, all the rest of these guys are called...
Robert RANK0, the famous author.
Robert RANK0.
Do you think you turned to Ranky and then...
Yeah, I was
then
turned to
changed
Ranky.
it when it actually moved on to 2?
No. I get scanning the other robots and thinking like, well, this guy's called like DLTH3X9. What a dumb name. I'm Robert RANK0. And I am just an idiot. That's is the moral of that story. Making my own fun. And, yeah. But no.
Is it the case that you can, with the recruiting gun, do you only recruit people of your rank or lower?
Yeah. Oh, I think it's based on the gun.
So that's what I was wondering, because the next gun up that I could see told me I could recruit 3 people, but it didn't say anything about rank, so I didn't know if I can recruit higher rank people. Because as soon as I got the recruiter gun, every friendly robot I encountered was rank 2, and I couldn't recruit.
I found that they would spawn in groups, that there'd be like 2 rank 1s, or rankies, as I like to think of them, in each group. 2 ranky Roberts,
Rankles.
and 1 Rankle Roberts that I couldn't charm with my charm gun.
He rankles at it.
He does. Yeah. Yes. That's that question. But no, like, as a sort of kind of lightweight explore, relatively lightweight explore sci-fi concept art and get into cool laser gunfights with Robert game, I'm liking it so far, particularly because it's a little bit cooler on say you're being hunted. I think it feels like I think I said this during the live pod, which went up last week, but it feels like a genuine step forward from that game, like in every way that matters, from what you do to the UI to the way it looks and feels. So good for them.
I had a cool moment where, like, I was exploring some debris and then I walked away from it, and then when I came back to it, coming from a different angle, I saw that it was a giant fucking robot skull and a huge robot arm, and I'm like, oh shit.
Oh man, the art
Here lies Big Robert.
the art direction is cool in that game. Is it Ian McHugh?
McHugh? I didn't know how to pronounce his name either, but yes. That's why I avoided saying it earlier.
Yeah, definitely follow him on Twitter because he's fucking amazing. And he just posts sketches he's done. He's like, oh, I did a warm-up sketch. I was like, oh my god, that's fucking awesome. The best robot ever.
It's like Ollie Moss's work on Firewatch, where you're just like, well, yep, sure. The best of this.
Just the best ever.
Yeah.
I follow somebody I think he works at Square Enix Montreal, and I think he's French-Canadian, and he was complimenting Ian's work on Twitter, and he was like, oh yeah, so this is, does anyone know, is Ian British? I think he is.
I have no idea.
No, okay, sure.
I think he is, and the basis of the story is that he is. So, French-Canadian guy loves his work and says, oh, this is awesome, I love you. And then Ian McHugh replies, steady on, chap. I was like, this is British art Twitter versus French-Canadian Twitter.
I love art Twitter. It's one of my favourite uses of Twitter.
Yeah,
yeah,
like about at least 30% of the people I follow are artists, just because that, like, what they output is their art, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Whereas what everyone else's output is their opinions, which is much harder to be good at.
Yeah, the worst thing ever. The other thing that I think impressed me was that there's a very early puzzle to do with the old FPS trick of making you go around a blind corner and then accidentally secretly moving you somewhere else in the game space, so that corridors loop back on themselves and seem to go forever and that kind of thing. I had actually seen Andy Kelly do this in The Office, do that bit in The Office with an earlier build of the game. But I think the thing that either he didn't see or that he did and I didn't see him do it, was that you can, and I've not seen a game do this, because I've seen games do Stanley Parable does this. You walk down a corridor and there's an invisible teleporter where it teleports you from the corridor you're in to an identical corridor without telling you, and then you turn the corner and you're somewhere you don't expect to be. But you have a scanner mode in Signal from Tolva that lets you scan things. And if you're in scanner mode, you can see the transitions.
Oh, that's what I was seeing.
You can.
I remember, I switched to scanner mode and I saw this
purple haze
barrier basically in front of me, and I switched back and forth and was like, oh, that has no, embodiment in the normal world. And I was really intrigued by that. And, so I heard afterwards that there's impossible places. I'd been through that place and I got the signal and everything. I never noticed that anything was impossible about it because, I was just lost. all the corridors looked the same to me. I didn't know where I was. And so I just stumbled into the signal and got it.
Oh yeah, I did think when, Tony Ellis, Superstar production editor on PC Gamer, was watching, I think, Andy doing that, and he says, it's a maze. The way you get out of a maze is you always turn left. Always follow the left wall. So I just used the Tony Ellis technique and got out of there in like 3 minutes. It just happened.
That's what my dad told me when I was playing Ultimate Underworld. I was like, where do I go?
Wait, was it just the thing?
You just hug the left wall.
Was it like immediately after the Second World War or something? Men were told, like, just turn left.
You're in a maze.
After Second World War, a lot of people were trapped in mazes after math.
I don't have a great understanding of history, Tom. I genuinely
you need
use
Robert Wars for that.
I did genuinely use that discovery to solve that particular encounter. When I could have just turned left, but it was a cool, even if it doesn't have a huge impact on how you end up solving that puzzle, it was just a cool realization. It gives me some hope for the challenges later in the game. I think that it felt rewarding to have realized that, there's a way of detecting this interesting thing that's happening in this specific environment. So, yeah. A good signal.
From Tolva. I really enjoy Alice O'Connor's insistence on referring to it as signal from Tovlo.
I mean, that's because Alice is brilliant generally, right? But
with like no explanation or caveat. It's just what she calls the game.
I ended up having to make this for them when the game came out, but I genuinely had... Because do you ever do that thing? You must have done because you worked on PC Gamer. But like that thing where you get the back half of a stupid joke stuck in your head forever. I had hot signals in your Tolva stuck in my head for just on and off. Like for no reason. Just I couldn't get that thought out of my brain. So I ended up having to make it for them as a free advert.
I saw that. It was very good.
It doesn't make any sense and it's a bad joke, but just have this because I
exercise yourself.
Yeah, it's like when you come up with the punchline for a pun before you come up with the first half of it.
Yeah.
Got some pretty shitty puns knocking around in my head for the last few months.
Yep. Yeah.
They never go away.
I remember doing that recently where like the energy to finish it off was too much and I just posted it in our Discord room and was like, there's something here, I don't know what it is, but you see where I'm going.
So I'm going to Star Wars Celebration this week and it's in Florida and I've been trying to... Earlier I was desperately trying to get Pip to appreciate this joke, and I appreciate given I've done a 3-part Star Wars podcast with Pip where she fails to remember every pertinent detail in Star Wars. I was trying to get her to guess where in Florida Star Wars Celebration was this year, and I was like, well, if you were going to pick between owners of the Millennium Falcon, your choices are Han, pregnant pause, Orlando. Thanks for laughing.
I enjoyed that. Yeah, that was a good
you
one.
two were the first people to laugh at that today.
We are the crowd.
You left such a pause, like something had to happen at the end of it.
And I'm not proud of that, but nonetheless, I needed to get it out.
Yeah.
Just need to get it out like poo. Not proud of it, but it's there.
But with no flush. Shall we do questions?
You sound unsure, Tom, like you haven't done that for a while.
I was hoping you'd cut that bit out.
No.
Fine.
Before we do questions, I just want to do a very quick shout out, public service announcement, word from our readers, listeners, sort of thing. So we have a listener whose name is Jake, who is doing a gaming marathon sometime soon for Cancer Research UK. Asked us to give it a shout out on the podcast. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the link to his Cancer Research UK fundraising page in the show notes, where you can check it out for yourself, but I invite you to do so because it's obviously a very good cause. I don't know much more about that because there's a little bit light on details at the moment in terms of what games he's going to be playing and for how long, but nonetheless a good thing. So check it out, and there's my plug. I'm getting better at these. I'm not. I'm still terrible at them.
I was impressed by,
Go on, Tom.
like, podcasts that do ads. Where the host had to read the ad.
Yeah.
I'm always simultaneously impressed at how good the host has got at reading the ad, but also disappointed that they are like having to do it.
Yeah, like it's funny because
We have thoughts about this, haven't we?
yeah, maybe this is too inside the baseball, but like I find that really off-putting in a lot of the podcasts I listen
Yeah,
to. Like
it's
even
something
podcasts I really enjoy.
Yeah.
There's something like
If it's just like they insert an ad, it's kind of fine, but when it's the host saying it, it always feels really...
I don't. So essentially, and maybe I'll rue saying this in the future where we rely on this sort of thing to support the podcast, but I don't believe that anybody happily subscribes to as many mail order snacks and shaving services and web design services as audiobook services as apparently they do. I mean, there's a lot of podcasts I love, and I don't want to claim those hosts are being disingenuous, but nonetheless, there's an element of like, really?
Have you listened to S-Town at all?
Not yet.
Not
I really
yet.
like to.
About starting, yeah.
Really, 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 really good. Also an incredibly serious podcast, and it still has Blue Apron ads in the middle, and they try and make it work, and it really doesn't work.
I think
so incongruous. It makes you like Blue Apron a lot less. It's like, oh, I would avoid using this company now.
good hosts can do it, make it funny and stuff. I think.
Yeah, this one is not the host. I don't think it's just like a pre-played advert, but it's the subject matter of the podcast is so fucking serious that you can't interrupt it with an advert for food.
This is the promise we're making you at Crate Crowbar, right? You're always going to get this pod. It's always going to be ad-free. We can't promise that there's not going to be 10 minutes of rambling about things in the middle of the podcast anyway, which might be worse. But at the very least, we're not selling you anything yet. On that note, we also had a question this week, and we've had this question a lot generally about whether or not, in addition to our Patreon, it's possible to make one-off donations to the pod. I just wanted to say that's something we're going to look into, because obviously it's something that I think people would like to have the option to do, because Patreon, with its weekly subscriber model, isn't necessarily going to be ideal for people. But we appreciate all the support that we get, and we want to find ways of making that make more sense from different angles.
I can't believe there's anyone who doesn't want to give us money constantly every month forever.
I find it hard to believe too sometimes.
It's the Patreon.
But
Are you not hearing this? This is gold.
yeah, exactly. But nonetheless, we're keen to find other ways for that to work, to make sense, so that we don't have to sell you stuff.
Yep.
God, I hope we never have to rely on advertising.
We're just badmouth the whole practice.
Indeed. Moving on. Willoughby writes, is Pentadact back?
Yes, hi.
I didn't tell you were going to read that question because I just thought I'd read it.
You got my organic true reaction there.
It's an interesting choice.
Yes, I.
That's it's an interesting choice of question, because the answer is either going to be yes or no, and obvious.
It's a short one.
Peter writes, if not too late, with the frequency that you talk or try to talk about console games, would you not consider ditching the PC exclusivity?
It's nice, I think, to have a podcast. Like, if you're a PC gamer, you don't have any other platforms, it's nice to have a podcast you can listen to and just be assured that you're, for the weekly one anyway, it's always going to be about things that you can play. And if you're recommending something, you can play it. I did the Horizon one, which is a PS4 exclusive. But I did it because I thought this could be in addition to the podcast, and you still get your weekly dose of PC stuff.
This is dumb, but like, even though before today I hadn't seen you for like 3 months, 4 months, I assumed that I'd seen you recently because I was listening to an hour of your voice talk about Horizon.
It was a lot like seeing me.
I do this
if
all
you'd
the
seen
time.
me in that period, I would have more or less given you that 60-minute rant.
How are you, Tom? Horizon Zero Dawn is a game, but so yeah, I think for the time being, we will stick to. So one of the things the Patreon allows us to do is put aside time to do these spin-off podcasts, which we'd like to do more of. We have some plans along those lines. It does include some console stuff. It makes more sense as take it or leave it side stuff than I think as part of the regular podcast. Partly because I like the idea that people who, if you have a PC, you can listen to this and find something that you can play, as Tom says. Also, I think it gives us some focus, because otherwise we, like, for example, I would love to do a podcast about Zelda Breath of the Wild. Like, I genuinely think it's I would be amazed if there was a better game released this year. It's going to be up there in games of the decade, I suspect, because it's one of those rare times where a game comes out and you're like, oh shit, this is a Half-Life 2. This is that level of quality. It's a Nintendo Switch game, so obviously we can't talk about it in the main pod, but also because of the type of game it is, it's either going to take over a pod where most people are going to be able to participate because most people's common ground is in PC, or me and Alex Wiltshire can go off and do a one-off side pod about it, get everything we want to say about it out of the way and not have to force you guys to sit through any more time than you already have to of me banging on about something I like but can't fully articulate why.
And also, it's probably just coincidence, but with console games, it tends to be more common for me. Like, Breath of the Wild, I feel sure I'm going to play it someday, but I haven't played it yet. And so I don't want to actually listen to a whole bunch of...
should play it.
I don't want to listen to a whole podcast about it yet. So, making that part of the main pod would be bad, both for, it not being a PC gaming thing anymore, and also because I don't want to hear that. I want to wait till I played it.
So those are our reasons for keeping the APC Gaming podcast under this podcast. Also, partly because Marshall's gone to Sweden and getting the logo changed is hard. So, fuck it. Luke writes, has the game ever invaded your dreams or nightmares?
Yes. I mean, so I definitely remember, like, after I saw Deus Ex Human Revolution before it came out, I'd seen it at preview and then had a dream about, like, it might have even been when I was waiting for a review code, because there was this torturous period of like 4 days where every day I was told it's going to come today for sure, and then it didn't come, and then after 4 days it did come. I was dreaming about how good it was going to be, and I dreamt about how amazing it was going to be. I've certainly dreamt about Heat Signature a bunch. Also, someone else has dreamt about Heat Signature, which has got, like I mentioned on Twitter recently, saying someone had it featured in their dreams, which is priority number one, is invade your users' nightmares and then go from there.
You basically shipped it then. It's that person's subconscious.
Shipped to your dreams.
I've definitely dreamt about games. I got into a serious thing with Ikaruga back in the day when I was at university, and I had nothing else to do with my time. Well, I had a lot more time to devote to video games. And the patterns and kind of insane, intricate, just unfolding insanity of that bullet hell format were just patterns that endlessly replicated in my dreams, and I'd wake up thinking about them. I can't say I enjoyed it. It was like being co-opted by a robot for a bit, but, it happened.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of nightmares with games. I'm sure I've had them. I've had like bad dreams of one games, but I can't remember them.
I can't think of any either. I have, as you would expect, had dreams about Dota. Like, just of course you do. 'Cause why wouldn't you? I mean, it's a nightmare anyway. So,
have you ever had dreams about like a game that doesn't exist, or like a version of a game that does exist, but it's cooler and better? I feel like I've had a lot of those. Like,
yeah, no, but I think one of the like this risks drifting into, and let me tell you about my dream territory.
Well, that was the question.
That was the question, but like, I think I find that like those kinds of like when it's not a specific game, it's almost hard to recognize as a game in a dream because the rules of dream are so fluid that something that might be maybe a VR game for a bit is suddenly actually then real based on logic of dream. Like, I have those kinds of dreams quite a lot where something might be a video game or might be real.
Yeah.
But it's impossible to tell. And it's not necessarily a new game idea because it's just a mad series of half-remembered things, which is not a sufficient pitch for your video game.
I did actually once dream that I was stuck in an event listening to overhearing a conversation between two cops because I was apparently in a police station, and it was so fucking tedious. It was just going on and on, like circular. But I couldn't escape. I couldn't leave because I had to hear the conversation. So that was a nightmare I've had about video games, which is definitely influenced by Deus Ex.
That sounds so Deus Ex Human Revolution. Like, there's this police station, and it's so difficult to get through that, like, the stealthy version is incredibly time consuming, and you just spend a lot of time in vents listening to people.
And that became an anxiety dream because I don't have real anxieties. Apparently.
Beep writes, favorite worker or gatherer unit in a game? For example, Warcraft Orc Peons, Dungeon Keeper Imps, Starcraft Protoss Probes. Dungeon Keeper Imps are probably mine due to their sounds.
Yeah, so
choice.
Warcraft's Orc Peons definitely is the first thing that springs to mind, like the Zog Zog and Danu.
Yeah.
I can't remember
Job's done.
what in Warcraft 3, if you played as undead, did your ghouls do some kind of resource gathering? Did they like eat trees or
Yeah.
something? I feel like ghouls were one of your resource gathering. Like, I don't think they're your builder units. I think there's something else that builds units, but I got this memory of them eating things that was in some way good for resources. And the thing I was really responding to was like the fact that every faction had a different way of gathering resources, which is carried across in StarCraft as well. Like where, like, you know, Terrans, you have a unit that builds, like, starts the building and it has to keep work on it all the time it's building. Protoss, they put the building down there, you know, to think about it. They can just walk off and do anything else. And then Zerg, they put the building down and are consumed by it. They become the building.
Yeah.
And
They
like,
evolve into
Zerg
the
is the
building.
maximum sacrifice, Protoss is the least sacrifice, and Terran is somewhere in between.
I was probably going to say Protoss Probes. I mean, I appreciate that all the options were given in the question, but partly because Protoss main in StarCraft, so that is always going to be a thing. I love the leave it and set it up and leave building mechanic. Also, this is, I mean, they knew exactly what they were doing, but they recently added a Protoss Probe to Heroes of the Storm as a hero. His name is Probius, the Protoss Probe. And I love that they did this, partly because it's stupid, mostly because it's stupid, but also because they announced this, like, we've got a new hero to announce, and they have a big fiction that people are very excited about. They have a lot of Overwatch characters, they've got all of the Diablo characters, they've got Warcraft characters, and they made this, that big reveal at IEM Katowice, Intel Extreme Masters Katowice, which is a big esports tournament. And their reveal was like from the Blizzard Pantheon, which people have mixed opinions about, but it means a lot to a lot of people. The thing we have chosen is Probius, the Protoss Probe. And actually, it's so adorable, quirky robots are low-hanging fruit when it comes to engagement from me specifically. Just, you know, want to be friends with them. What's wrong with that? But they've done a phenomenal job of animating a Protoss Probe so that it can emote, with its weird floating hollow flap eyebrows.
Have you seen that survey that was going on Twitter? I can't remember. I don't actually think I ever knew what it was about, but it was a survey in response to some kind of product, and the checkboxes were, I want to protect it. I want to see it grow up healthy and strong. I will tell my neighbors and friends about it.
Yeah,
you in this probe.
At least two of the three. I mean, those are the three laws of robotics.
The Twitter laws of robotics.
Exactly. Asimov's laws of robotics. And those are the three. I just want to see it. I just want to make sure it's
Want
okay.
to protect it.
I'd die for that. No, I wouldn't. So yeah, like, by extension, probably. I don't know. There's a lot of good worker units.
Yeah, didn't the Night Elves in Warcraft have a wisp thing?
Wisps.
Was that consumed when you built the building? Or?
Actually, maybe wisps were here, and for some specific reason. No,
because wisp is also kind of a hero in Dota, right?
Yeah, well, this is the best thing about it, right? Like, so Night Elf worker units, they gathered from trees by orbiting a tree. They didn't destroy the tree. That was their thing. Is they
God bless them.
They were the miner that didn't have to kill the tree.
Mm-hmm. They just studied the tree.
Yeah.
And from this, we learnt wood.
But in Dota's kind of mad grab for Warcraft 3 assets that could be repurposed as heroes, eventually that reached Wisp, now known as Io, who's a very unique hero in Dota 2, partly because he's a Wisp, or he or she, it just beeps, because obviously, but this led to what I would say is in the top 10, but not the top 5 disappointing moments in democracy in 2016. When every year at the International, Valve host a public vote to determine the next Arcana, which is the most expensive kind of cosmetic, and it's a very expensive cosmetic for a hero that changes something substantial about them. What it used to mean was it add loads of particle effects, change voice lines, change the aesthetic of the character, change the way ability effects work, that kind of thing. What it now means is it makes them teal and on fire.
Is that
without exception?
Visually teal?
Yes, visually teal, maybe a tiny bit purple. At some point in about 2015, they just started making all the Arcanas were just, you're on fire now and you're teal. Phantom Assassin, Juggernaut, Monkey King, mostly. It's the same thing every time, apparently. But at the final round, the choice for that vote is always really interesting because the community always gets behind something stupid. But the voting public, just the voting block of Dota 2 players, will always vote for the things they think is cool. So it's always a race between what the people who don't read Reddit want and what the people who read Reddit want. And the community overwhelmingly wanted them to do an Arcana for the floating ball of light that is a Warcraft Wisp. Desperately wanted this, to the point that it's an elimination bracket, basically, with all the heroes starting off at different sides of a bracket. And it ended with Wisp, or Io, versus Juggernaut, who's like a samurai. So the archetypal, popular in pubs, coolman, versus a floating ball of light that only beeps and respects trees. And during the International, the final result is revealed, and it was revealed that Juggernaut had won in the final vote. And genuinely, there was like a wave of shock and sadness in Key Arena, in this basketball arena full of people there to see Dota. There's this wave of like, oh fuck, really? Oh man. And people not quite go over it. And then they finally released the Juggernaut Arcana like a month ago, like a couple of weeks ago. And it even includes like a floating spirit that orbits him as if to taunt the people who, the 48% or whatever it was that desperately wanted.
He's there in spirit.
He's there in spirit, but it's not enough. Not enough. Anyway. It's disappointing.
Anyway, it's not a big deal.
It's just ultimately it's just an Internet Wizards game, but.
In terms of work units, I really like the Harvester from June 2. Which is just a big old bus that has to drive very slowly across the sand and then get eaten by a sandworm, probably. And they're so slow and crap, they have to be transported by ornithopters who fly out and pluck them up and put them into their harvesting places. So I always enjoyed how big and vulnerable they were. I love the Tech Priest Marines from Dawn of War 1, who are basically like robed figures with, like ordinary human arms, but then two big metal clampers that, and as they move,
clamps.
they clamp with the clamps, and they move. You don't see their legs because they're under this kind of, under these ropes that go right the way down to the floor, but they move incredibly fast as though they've got wheels under there. And as they move, their two clamps just kind of wave and clamp madly. And they're just kind of, like,
gotta keep clamping.
This kind of Zoidberg-esque kind of things. Rush around,
Like,
which is amazing.
the fascinating thing with Dawn of War is like they had to do all that work to kind of take those miniatures and make them move in a way that respects the spirit of the miniature.
Yes.
And it feels like, to an extent, with the Mechanicum, they've gone like, no, wait, the Mechanicum silly. Like, you don't have, your computer, your PDA shouldn't be a flying skull with a laser eye. That's a stupid idea. And if you think that's a good idea, you're stupid.
I love them. They have so much character. Yeah. I'm so sad when they do.
Actually, I really like the Command & Conquer Tiberium series, bin lorries. The Tiberium harvesting bin lorries that go out to Tiberium field.
Reversing with Tiberium here.
Yeah.
Get out of my way.
They make a Tiberium collection once every 2 weeks, but they'll pick up your regular bins every week. Alistair writes, Dear mud crabs and rad roaches. You can see where this one's going. I am very much a fan of Bethesda RPGs, both those radioactive and those elfy. The freedom they give you to play as you wish means that despite the pretty duff animations / main stories, I've sunk many an hour into their worlds. Why bother with all that dragon rubbish when I can be a thief that steals things with telekinesis? Recently, however, I found myself less enamoured. Fallout 4 seemed to remove almost all ability to create your own character. Sure, you could make them look how you want, but really every interaction you had in the game, your character would respond as the 2 preset ones, making role-playing as anything but a retired war hero or his impressively gun-savvy lawyer wife difficult. Skyrim was much better on this front, but suffered badly from all quests being basically to clear a dungeon. It might be rose-tinted glasses, but I swear that Morrowind and Oblivion had a few more quests for each town that weren't just combat. My point is, I fear that the R from the RPG in these games is slowly fading away, and I'm worried that TES 6 will consist of nothing but you, Chosen Juan, on a grand quest to mash attack and chug potions for the entire game. What do you all think? Do you know of any other RPGs with as much freedom as I could switch to should the worst happen? Walloping goodbyes, Alistair.
Chosen Juan is great.
Chosen Juan is great.
I played a lot of Morrowind. I can't speak for Daggerfall, but I feel like there were a lot of quests. There were a lot of fetch quests. There were a lot of just deliver this fucking package to this fucking town, and then you fucking do it, and then they say fucking thanks.
Hang on, pause a second. If you were playing an RPG, like a relatively serious fantasy RPG, and someone said, deliver this fucking bag to that fucking town, you'd be delighted.
I don't know. It depends on what the reward would be. If I get real XP and I get better at game development, sure.
All right, I'm going to blow your mind. Everything gives you real XP.
Yeah, it's not as useful as it is in video games. Yeah, I feel like Morrowind just had a whole shitload of quests, and yeah, there were some that were not combat related and were different. But I didn't feel like I was really defining my character by doing them. I just did all of them. I was just like, whoever I am, I do all of the quests because I need this stuff.
Yeah.
And I agree a little bit about Fallout. For me, it was like the backstory was so specific. It was like you literally lose your son/partner, and
those are 2 separate people. If people haven't played that game.
Yes, you lose them in different ways. I think one of them is dead and one of them is missing. I can't remember which way around it is, but
partner dead, son missing.
Okay, and so that's a very particular. I mean, you even play the backstory. You were in domestic bliss, whether you were the housewife or the working Joe, and they show you everything about that life, so you don't get to imagine who you were, you don't get to imagine like what the character was. But I really like the voice for the female protagonist of Fallout 4, and also the thing I can't forget, it's such a tiny thing, but it's I was so impressed that it's burned in my memory forever, is that when you skip dialogue and you're drunk, all of the different face buttons on the controller, and I don't know what the equivalent is on keyboard, give different kinds of dismissive answers to the person. Like, not only do you skip their dialogue, but then also you're going to say something to skip their dialogue to indicate that you're impatient, but then there are 4 different ways of skipping their dialogue. Like, if you press the most aggressive one, it's like, yeah, whatever, yeah. And then there's other ones that are just, like, more confrontational or more belligerent. It's incredible.
Both confrontational and belligerent.
Yeah, those are the options. Like dismissive, confrontational, or belligerent.
That's a good answer to. I bounced off Fallout 4 completely, but that's a decent reason.
Yeah, I also did really. I never completed it. Never got anywhere close. Fallout 3, I think I completed it. It was kind of an afterthought. But definitely that was a game I got really into, and Skyrim's a huge deal for me. The fact that Fallout 4 didn't, it didn't click in the way that every Bethesda game has clicked since Morrowind is conspicuous.
Yeah, I think I might be a bit... Like, I don't think those games are delivering enough of what I now value, because the freedom, it's meaningful, but it's not mega meaningful in terms of, like, the impact you can actually have on the world. There's, like, the novelty of, like, I can steal stuff and murder someone important is kind of one-off in terms of how that'll pan out. And as story experiences, those games are not good, I would argue, for the most part. So I found those, I think, of all, like, as I've started to spend less time sinking into single player games, those are the RPGs that have suffered the most. Like, because I loved Skyrim as well, but it feels like maybe that's the last one of those that I really invest all that time in, unless they shake up the formula a bit, or just invest more in telling a story that has some worth. Like, it seems like the next step for them, right?
It's weird, because I went back to Skyrim when they released their HD edition, and the magic was really still there. Like, that world is just fantastic. The music, just what they do with the perspective on the mountains and the sense of just being able to just go somewhere and find something is really, really powerful in that game. And like the main quest is just famously such a footnote in Skyrim. Like, almost anything else you can do is better than the main quest, which is obviously bad, but the sense of just striking out into that world again is still magical in a way that Fallout 4 was completely boring to me. They've done everything they could do with that world for me in Fallout 3, and it's just a repetition of the same jokes.
I think you are right. Like, I think maybe I'm being too harsh on Skyrim specifically, like, because I love that game, and it was totally because of the sense of the place. I'd love to see them make a more involved combat system, something like that. Like, I'd love to be getting into sword fights that felt like sword fights, that kind of thing.
That'd be cool.
I felt Fallout was just because ultimately the combat system didn't really do anything for me. It doesn't feel like a gunfight, but nor does it feel like a RPG fantasy battle either. It's that sort of awkward combination of the two. Nor is it a turn-based strategy game, which Fallout traditionally was pretty much, or a tactics game. So maybe my poor recent memory of it is based entirely on Fallout 4.
I think the role-playing aspect of games is interesting because a lot of that is about conversation choice and basically just how you express yourself to NPCs, even if the destination is the same, which it almost always is in conversation systems. How you get there is actually important for you as a player. It informs how you think about yourself and how you think about your avatar. But I think, like, with the fury over like Mass Effect Andromeda's animations and stuff, maybe people would be more tempted to go towards like more bespoke, hand-tailored animations, something like, more like The Witcher 3, where there are way fewer conversation options, so you're forced into a much more one-track character. So that's an interesting one. It was interesting playing Tides of Numenera and just having such an incredible wealth of conversation choices because they didn't have to build all of the kind of technology to support every sentence you could possibly say in the game.
I was going to say Tides of Numenera is a great choice if what you're invested in is the sense of owning your character and meaningfully putting your stamp on your character. Games where you didn't have a voiced main character were brilliant for this, generally. Subsequently, RPGs have suffered for it a little bit, and Mass Effect specifically, Dragon Age as well, is interesting for being the game that tries to do the cinematic presentation and the sort of high production values that also gives you a substantial amount of control over who your character is. Dragon Age even more so, but even Mass Effect, like, it wants you to have different interpretations of who Shepard is, or different interpretations of who Ryder is, and for that to be valid, and for those characters to be male or female, or to look in a bunch of different ways, and to be ultimately an expression of the player. And this might be something we get onto later as well, but The Witcher doesn't do that.
There is only one Geralt.
Yeah, there is one Geralt, and that obviously is a benefit to the designer when it comes to constructing a coherent narrative that makes sense around a single character that you can relatively reliably define the parameters of. And stop me if this take is slightly too hot, because it genuinely might be. But I wonder if one of the reasons that we've seen such a kind of heavy fucking scare quotes traditional gamer backlash to the weaknesses of Mass Effect Andromeda, but also vast groundswell of actual devotion to CD Projekt and The Witcher, is because Geralt as a character basically fits within the parameters of what games would traditionally give games' presumed audience. Like, role-playing game, like, Geralt, I appreciate the character has some depth, but on the surface is a bit of a Mary Sue from a kind of traditional gamer dude protagonist point of view. Like, he's a cool man who might be with a cool wolf amulet and pure white hair who fights with 2 swords and beds every woman he sees, right? Like he's a quite lame fantasy made flesh. And I mean, even the first game does stuff to make that more interesting than it sounds. But if you draw out just the details of that character on a character sheet, you've got the D&D player that is going to be a pain in the ass for the rest of your session, right? And there isn't that interest in giving people the freedom to define their own fantasies about who they want their hero to be. It's a very specific fantasy, which not to say that can't be deconstructed, but it's limited.
Yeah, it's interesting the way that The Witcher 3 does this. I love The Witcher 3. I think it's brilliant. I think it's an amazing piece of genre fiction, basically. It's just, it knows exactly the fantasy it's trying to create, and it is that, like, quite staid fantasy, but it just does it better than anything else. And then Geralt basically has 2 conversation options in most exchanges, which basically make no real difference. But the quest design is so good that it gives you ways to express yourself through quest outcomes. And that's the difference between something like Mass Effect and The Witcher, where the Witcher 3's side quests can go in various directions with various outcomes, and you feel as though you've affected that, whereas it feels as though Mass Effect you're always going to the same destination, but it's the journey you get to choose, and that's how you define your character.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting distinction, because and again, like, I'm tiptoeing around what I think might be too strident a point, but I worry that, so the tone of the discussion about these games online is set for a large part by the majority of, and we know this because we have the statistics of who buys games and who reads websites, like the majority of straight white male gamers that define the tones of these discussions and buy these games and so on, for whom Geralt is probably an easier buy than any other demographic of people, because it's a fantasy specifically for that group of people. And for whom the fantasy of being able to create your own hero and embody yourself in a game is of less value and of less novelty, because games have always catered to you. And that, I think, contextualizes that division between games of the BioWare mold that give players a tremendous freedom to shape the tone and the nature of their path through a journey to a fixed destination, as opposed to the games that put you in the boots of a fixed protagonist like Geralt, who goes to various destinations but does so in a very fixed identity. Again, it's a woolly point to have made after a couple of glasses of rum, but it's something that I think bothers me about the way we discuss those role-playing games now, because it feels like there's real value in giving people the ability to embody themselves or a character that is at least relatable to them in a game with AAA cinematic production values. And that is not an easy thing to achieve, and it's one of the reasons that Andromeda has a lot of the problems it has, is because it doesn't do the more straightforward thing, which is to have a fixed protagonist. And the value of that, I think, is maybe lost on people for whom something like a character like Geralt is just an easy win with no problematic elements, where I don't think it's as simple as that by any means.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of intersection between like technological problems and kind of culture more widely, and culture particularly among people who consume games. So people are very angry about Andromeda because it's failed them technologically. Like, it hasn't delivered the faces of the fidelity they want, and the sacrifice that's been made to allow that to happen doesn't mean anything to them, to many people, because they don't care that you can make a green woman or like a black man and also a white dude or anyone that you want. That doesn't necessarily matter to a lot of the audience. So all they see is these faces look shit and these eyes look weird, and what the fuck is that face my rider just pulled? That's just fucking insane. And I can't hold that against anyone, because a lot of the faces in that game do look crap, and it's just it's a technological failing that to support a fantasy that a lot of the audience doesn't want. So was that a worthwhile sacrifice? I mean, I enjoy BioWare games because they've gone in that direction, and I enjoy people going in lots of different directions. So I love to see CD Projekt Red with The Witcher doing this one thing, and BioWare trying to do this other thing. But it's interesting how these problems arise. Perhaps we should read the next question because we're basically in that territory already.
Yeah, it was actually so it's not the next question, but
It could be.
it could be. We have the power to make that.
We have the power.
So, because we've been thinking about this question, so let's get onto it because I think it's an important thing to discuss. Frody writes, "Dear crate of the finest rough-cut Kentucky burley fresh from the docks of London, congratulations and many thanks for the first live pod. I spent the time chortling like a drain alongside my brother, the truculent archaeologist, you'll remember from the live pod if you were there, which is me. Apparently, I forgot that you guys were there. And after a day trying out a selection of games at Res, it was a treat to have your piping hot takes served up fresh. God. Wonderful to see Graham back as well. His brooding brogue has been sorely missed and remains so.
Indeed.
He's since returned to Jersey. I'd considered bringing my question to the panel at the event, but felt that it might not have been the place or the time, and after hearing last week's pod, I was pleased to have held fire. I've been shocked and saddened by the reaction that Mass Effect Andromeda has received from parts of the gaming community, those parts euphemistically referred to as more vocal. Accusations of SJW pandering and liberal agenda are 10 a penny online, but having recently started playing the game, I can't see any greater politicization in Andromeda than in previous games from the series, games which I don't remember receiving such a negative reaction. Though this may simply be a sign of the times, I wonder whether it is also indicative of a change in gamers' mentality since 2007. Back then, the first Mass Effect game came under attack from conservative pundits for its supposedly pornographic content. This engendered a protective solidarity from gamers who seemed happy to embrace the game, irrespective of personal politics. Nowadays, gamers feel less threatened and so more able to assert their personal beliefs in reaction to the games they play. So what do you think has caused this heightened reaction to Andromeda? Is it something that is going to continue to affect gaming in the post-Gamergate world, or is it likely to die down given time? And to what extent will games' narratives and design affect or be affected by the changing political landscape of the world at large? I realise this is a massive topic and rather overlong email. So many of the pieces I've read on the ideological position of games tends towards histrionics or denial. I've always felt that CNC has offered reasonable and proportionate discussion on the politics of gaming and would really appreciate your views. All the best, Fro. Let's attempt reasonable and proportionate while we're quite a lot of rum down.
Would you like some wine, Chris?
Yes.
Hooray!
Hey! Actually, tell you what, I'm going to finish the rum.
Okay. There is one thing in Andromeda that. So I haven't really followed the backlash that closely, and I don't know if this
Good for you.
If this triggered a lot. But there is a trans character in Andromeda who, the way I saw this was actually from people on the left objecting to it for being so upfront and so immediate that basically there's a trans character where you talk to them and say, hey, how did you get here? And they just immediately give their gender history, basically. And this is being called out as kind of a pretty lazy and facile representation of trans people. I imagine that also was not popular amongst people who don't want trans characters in their games at all and who are super narrow-minded about like what kinds of who will see any gender identity that is not what they're currently used to as being shoved in their face. Like, oh, there's one here I don't recognize. Oh, it's being shoved in my face. Stop shoving it in my face. BioWare
have since said they're going to redo and patch that scene.
Yeah,
which is interesting. I think it was Rob Fearon on Twitter who pointed out something, or at least linked something that I thought was insightful about this, and that I'd. So I completely agree. I think that scene is really poorly done, particularly given that they did a much better job with the trans character in Dragon Age Inquisition.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting about it is I can understand why that scene got written the way it got written, particularly given how socially conscious BioWare's writers are the rest of the time and how sensitive they are. Honestly, like that writing team is far more sensitive to the nuances of how people behave and what's important to people and how people are.
Yeah,
the vast majority of writing teams in any AAA part of the games industry.
I remember reading some kind of post-mortem-ish thing about the trans character in Dragon Age that I can't remember if it was something maybe it wasn't something they changed after release, but it was about like during development they had a version of that actually they kind of ran it by trans people on staff, and those people had some, suggestions and changes.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something that obviously got missed. What I thought was interesting about it is that the problem there is it's obviously the biggest problem is the way it's been written. But the reason it's been written that way is because of the way a structural conceit of those games. People get so invested in those games and in the relationships they forge the characters in those games that I think maybe it's easy to forget that they're not naturalistic in the way that they're written or staged. It's not that kind of fiction. And it's not just that it's science fiction. What it is that Mass Effect is set in a world where no one moves except the most important person in the world. The most important person in the world can go anywhere they like, and they can walk up to anybody they like, and they can press use on that person, and that person will tell them their darkest secret or their most personal piece of information about themselves. And the vast majority of the time, that is sci-fi type stuff. That is, there are so many conversations in Andromeda where, why did you come to Andromeda? It's like that game's stock way of getting you to know something about a character, because it's interesting, right? Like, if everyone is signed on to be cryo-frozen and shipped to a different galaxy with no hope of ever going home, that's got to tell you something about the person. And so the vast majority of the time, it will be either a fairly mundane thing, like, I just got Wanderlust, or I'm a scientist and I'm devoted to finding new things, or it will be something sci-fi-ish, like, I was on the run from the space cops and I had to go to Andromeda or something like that. And
I'm Space Sawyer from Lost.
Exactly. The mistake they made, but I suspect the reason they wrote that scene the way they did, is they treated somebody's struggles with their transition as a fact that could be disclosed using that mechanism. That it didn't have weight outside of that context. Because, and this is a lot to do with how information is given weight and the weight that is attached to that because of the particular vulnerability of trans people, basically, in our society, not the society of the people in the game, but the society of people that are receiving the game. And because those people are vulnerable, that information is sensitive and needs to be handled more delicately than it was in the game. It can't simply be plugged into a fictional delivery mechanism that is otherwise completely uncritical about the type of information.
It becomes tokenistic then.
Yes, it does become tokenistic.
Yeah,
and I guess there's kind of a representation issue where even if your explanation is like, oh, the reason this person volunteers this information is because in the future it's much less big deal and it's just something you would mention in a casual conversation, then it's not so positive a thing to sort of include trans characters in that way, because hopefully one of the things you achieve by doing that is for trans people to identify with it and to feel represented and to have someone to root for, and kind of, I think it's really good that BioWare in particular focus on these things, and they try, and they don't always get it 100% right, but they're trying, and there are way more companies who are not trying at all and are not interested in doing this at all. And also that EA, who own BioWare, even before they owned BioWare, I think, were pretty outspoken about having a very inclusive kind of company policy. And they haven't always been perfect with it. But the fact that they are so outspoken about it and the fact that they kind of fight for it is not trivial. And I don't think it's cynical. I don't think that they think that this is going to make them more money. I think it's actually something they believe in. It seems like there are positive PR effects for it, but I don't. The impression I get is there's a bunch of people who genuinely care about this stuff.
I think so. Like my experience of talking to the Dragon Age Rankers team was that I think there are issues. Like, I think trying is all well and good, but at some point, like, tokenistic or simplistic portrayals of vulnerable people genuinely can be harmful. And I think the ultimate form of trying is to hire people of that, or whatever identity it is that you're attempting to portray in your game, to write and do that thing for you. It's not to try extra hard. It's to hire and to elevate people. Like, the job shouldn't, like, it should always be to amplify the minority voices, not to speak for them. However, like interesting one. I said this, I think, on the podcast I did with Alex, but one of the interesting differences between Mass Effect Andromeda and Mass Effect 1, which is the game that it's most similar to, is the fact that they invested loads of resources in making male and female versions of every race. So, like, there are, male and female villains, there are male and female Turians, there are male and female, like, suddenly, like, all the Mass Effect universe is fully populated by at least, men and women of each species that you encounter. And that takes, the more you know about AAA game development, the more you realize that took effort. That took a chain of people all the way up to a project manager and an executive signing off on the expense of, on internally and collectively justifying the cost that it takes to produce a properly diverse game. And that, I think, is laudable. From both an individual point of view of the designers and the artists and stuff that make that stuff happen, all the way to the business culture that is willing to say because it is going to cost you more. And that is the sad fact of it, is particularly the thing I'm saying earlier, that like, it is easy for game developers to default to making games only for their perceived audience. And that audience is often overwhelmingly male. And it has taken a long time for the audience, for the industry to start to shake that off, and it's only partially starting to shake it off. So it means something, I think, when a developer says it is important to us that we invest the art and animation resources in ensuring that we have both genders represented for every species in our game. Because that's not trivial by any stretch of the imagination. And I think it is an important step forward. I think that at that point, the effort really does matter, because it's not quite a question of the right writers. It's a question of simply investing in the whole pipeline in a way that allows that to happen.
I think if you're looking at blockbuster games, in contrast with blockbuster films or any other equivalent industry, like the games industry is very progressive. I think in most of its major studios do have these concerns and listen to them. I kind of take I'd like to say, introduce a slightly different angle to it, where, the Mass Effect fantasy is the perfect multicultural fantasy in many ways. It's the Star Trek fantasy of, people on the Citadel living together in perfect harmony. And some of the plot lines are kind of revolve around the frictions that happen. But as, a liberal person, I am almost never challenged by those games. I never, maybe Ashley is one of the exceptions. I never ever encounter viewpoints that actually cause me any pause for thought. Whereas if I was socially conservative or conservative in many other ways, I would be coming up against friction all the time with these games. And I think you see a lot of this is an important part of the conflict that happens, the anger that people experience when they come into these games, because they see these games promoting a multicultural ideal they don't necessarily agree with. And I want to be challenged more by these games. I want to see more conservative perspectives in these games that are actually going to make me think about my characters and my,
You want the Fox News Mass Effect.
well,
I mean, weirdly, I think, so Andromeda sort of goes halfway there, because it asks you to make some decisions with regards to, it's not a spoiler, but with regards to the Krogan.
I was actually thinking about the Krogan in Mass Effect in terms of there's not really a clear. I thought that decision was really interesting. It was.
Yeah.
There was no great answer to it. Either whatever your philosophy is, that it kind of challenges you. I
think Andromeda maybe is a little bit soft touch with that stuff. Like, I think I agree. I mean, and so I can see where you're coming from. Like, and I do think that a lot of, from my experience with Gamergate specifically and that long period of emails, I do think people feeling like their personal politics aren't represented in games is a motivating factor. Possibly not the motivating factor, but it is a motivating factor in that whole thing. However, in terms of why Andromeda was singled out specifically and received the backlash that it did, which was ultimately the topic of this question, I do think it goes both deeper and simpler than that in some ways. Like, I think for the vast majority of cases, it's not as sophisticated as my personal beliefs aren't respectfully represented within this game. Because, and I'll happily say this, like, I think that degree of nuance when it comes to the presentation of political beliefs is currently, at least in terms of the discourse about games online, the preserve of the left. Like, totally. I can't think of an example where I've seen a serious, coherent argument for the more sensitive portrayal of conservative viewpoints in game. What you see is a reactionary backlash, and not just reactionary backlash, an imitative reactionary backlash, which is more about repeating and amplifying reactionary, by which I mean instinctive and uncritical negative reactions to progressiveness in games, basically. Like, it is the reason that BioWare get this hate and other studios that suffer for the same issues in terms of animation or plot structure or balance or open world filler or whatever it is that people are going to be upset about. The reason other studios don't get quite the same vitriol is purely, as far as I can tell, because they don't have the same values in terms of progressive portrayal of characters, right? Like, BioWare have had a target painted on them for a long time, and the Andromeda backlash is in no small part fueled by that feeling. And I think that's an uncomfortable truth for a lot of people, because Andromeda has problems. It's not a perfect game by any means. This isn't the only thing wrong with it. But the appetite for consuming stuff, articles, videos, whatever it is, that take down that game is fueled by an animosity that, at least in part, has a reactionary anger towards BioWare specifically at its heart, I think. And I feel for them a bit, because they are a AAA game developer now. They're not a quirky RPG studio. They've got to make games for gamers, God help them. And that means maybe towing the line. And you see this response whenever this stuff comes out, that like they're going to try and adjust plot arcs, and they're going to try and adjust stuff to kind of bring it more in line with what people expect.
Yeah.
My fear is that this whole thing, this whole circus around that game, is only going to result in BioWare getting less freedom and being more hemmed in to a particular way of doing things to avoid offending. And I think that'd be a huge shame.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm encouraged by the fact that EA themselves have taken a pretty strong positive stance on this stuff. Just going by their corporate image, which I understand might not be 100% authentic, it feels like they would not be the sort of the negative force clamping down on BioWare and saying, no, you can't do this because it's too expensive. Feels like that their allegiances are aligned in that sense.
I hope so.
I wonder if an element of this is anything to do with, I do not know what Male Rider looks like. I probably have seen him at some point in some trailer, but there is enough of the female rider that I can picture her perfectly, and I can't picture the male rider. And I wonder if putting her certainly closer to the forefront, I don't know if she actually is the kind of lead, but in Mass Effect, it was always the dude. And in Mass Effect 3, they did alternate covers, but it was still the dude. Like, they did alternate versions, but by that point, they've been established. It's the dude. And with Andromeda, I don't get that impression. I feel like it's actually, if anything, it's the woman who's the poster.
Yeah, it is. So, Shepard is named after Alan Shepard, who I think was the first American in space.
Right.
Ryder is named after Sally Ride, who's the first American woman in space. Huh. So, like, it feels like...
the namesake kind of gives the gender.
Yeah, I think I think there was a sense of, because they started to get it with Mass Effect 3, right? When they started I think they did the reversible box art where you could have either Shepard. And that was the first time they established a default female Shepard look. Really.
Yep.
Like,
and it was close to mine, but not quite.
So I appreciate this is a big set of questions. So the other side of this question was, to what extent will games have to react to the changing political landscape of the world at large? And that's a real big question. And I'm quite drunk.
I feel like I feel quite positive about this, because I feel like I've seen such a big reaction from, I don't know, I follow a lot of people on Twitter, and a bunch of them are video games people, and there are a bunch of people who are kind of like, I don't know, around video games, and with Overwatch and Mass Effect to some extent, I would cite those two as the two main games that have brought people in who are not huge fans of any other games, who are now, they're not just into games, they're fucking massive fans of those games. Like, the fan fiction and the shipping and the relationship stuff from Mass Effect and Overwatch is just intense. Like, the people who I would have previously classified as, or previously would have classified themselves as either non-gamers or kind of on the fringes of gaming are now fucking well in. They're like, this is my whole jam. I fucking love this thing. And it's not just something I play. It's something I talk about. It's something I like maybe cosplay as. It's something I talk to my friends about. It's a huge deal. And that, I don't know how much that is attributable to the change in what games are and how it's much is attributable to the social climate, but it feels like both those things are probably contributing positively to a wider range of people getting really intensely engaged in games with cool characters.
I think the other thing is that games are predominantly a young person thing. And by young, I mean under 35, as you established earlier.
Kids, you mean?
Yeah, but like, obviously there are exceptions to that. But broadly speaking, you know, whatever you want to say about the current political climate, it is large part determined by the beliefs and desires of people who are in their 50s and 60s.
Mm.
Like, you know, whether you want to believe this whole thing is a huge generation war or not, like, voting patterns and so on indicate that people under 35 vote one way and people over 50 vote a different way, and the way that demographics and voter numbers and so on are working out gives us the course that we're on. I don't think anyone in a publishing capacity in video games is stupid enough to believe that the fact that a certain generation is voting overwhelmingly for isolationist far-right policies means that all games need to become isolationist far-right things. If anything, something like the tragic misjudgedness of that Pepsi advert indicate that the people making money decisions about brands are chasing the young woke person vote to such an extent that it's possibly even worse than had they chased the fascists. And so I wouldn't necessarily be concerned about games of any sort, indie to AAA, being overly affected by the global political climate up and until the point that, I don't know, actual thought police are implemented.
Yeah, things are banned.
Yeah.
I'm traveling to the US soon. I might have to give over all my passwords for everything.
I'm going to the US tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm told you're not. You shouldn't do that. That's what I was told.
You just got back, Tom.
Right after I got back, they said, like, don't go there.
Don't come back.
Don't go there. You got to give out my passwords. I did give out my passwords because I had to show to immigration. They were very suspicious because I was going there for 3 months, which is the maximum amount of time you're allowed to go there for the particular reason I was there. And I thought that meant go there for that amount of time and it's absolutely fine. Turns out it means go there for that amount of time and we're fucking suspicious. And they said, do you have any documentation saying that I've invited you here? I'm like, I got the email that my friend Robin sent me. I guess I could show you that. And they said, okay, show me that. And I was like, oh. So this was totally voluntary. They did not force me. I voluntarily logged into my Gmail account and showed them the email. And then I realized Gmail threads things pretty strongly. So this is the entire thread of everything we've talked about up until this point and everything we've talked about after this point. And most of what we talked about was like how we played Dishonored 2. I was talking about like Robin's like scouring every single apartment, and I'm kind of going for like we're both stealth players, and then like the immigration officers, oh, so you tend to play games in like a kind of stealth way, and I'm like, yeah, that's also like the kind of games I make. And we got into a whole deep conversation about stealth games. That was
an immigration experience. Pleasant grilling anyone has ever received.
It was great. I mean, the guy, he actually, when he asked me what I made before I said Gunpoint, he ran off down the corridor to get his phone to show me that he had the Gunpoint soundtrack on his phone.
No, really?
And that he used it to set the mood when he was doing employee evaluations, because he didn't want them to feel like it was too serious. And the Gunpoint soundtrack apparently has some jauntiness to it. So he would play the Gunpoint soundtrack to like ease them. And he was like super complimentary about it. I really loved it. And it was one of the only games he's bought in the last like year. And so I thought, okay, great. This is awesome. I'm through surely. But no, it's another hour of interrogation after that. Like that did not get me through.
I'm relying on the fact that I'm off to the Star Wars place, and
Yeah,
I feel like
if you're not going for 3 months, you've got a big head
I feel
start
like
on
I
me.
can pass your immigration quiz about Star Wars, but I also feel like this is possibly the easiest immigration challenge that we might face.
While I was waiting, couldn't be more poetic. While I was waiting in immigration to be let into the country, the thing that was showing on TV was Obama's last ever speech as president.
Fucking hell.
It was literally the last moments of Obama's presidency. So that also means all the inconvenience that I suffered cannot be blamed on Trump. It was all under Obama.
His fault. I'm really worried about it because we have to go to America fairly regularly to cover this for our job, and if the extreme vetting stuff comes in and they want access to my like work email, like I've signed loads of NDAs with US companies that are going to be, I'll be violating by showing them that stuff. So I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to do.
I have several friends who just wipe their phones before they travel.
Take a burner or something,
Yeah, erase it all.
Man, really weird, really weird.
Yeah, I just refuse. Like,
Well, let's send you back.
yeah, well, I mean,
Just don't take a phone.
yeah, I suppose don't take a phone, but at the same time, like the expense of sending someone back for not, this is absurd. Like,
How can you do business like in that?
yeah, like I think at some point you've got to demonstrate that the system has consequences for both parties.
We'll see.
You could probably forego having a phone for like a typical press trip, because there was a time when data was prohibitively expensive, so you couldn't really use your phone for anything anyway, and you'd use your laptop for Wi-Fi. And
Interesting times.
Yep. I'm not sure that we answered the question about. Maybe we did answer the question about why Andromeda attracted the eye that it did. But
We've either answered it or infuriated millions.
probably
if we had millions of listeners, maybe. But we don't, so we haven't.
Hooray!
Hey!
Damage limitation.
If you were infuriated and you'd like to send us a question for a future episode of the Crate and Crowbar, you can question us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at Crate and Crowbar, and hang out in our Discord to discuss these and other matters with our amazing community. The link to our Discord channel is on the website at crateandcrowbar.com. Crate and Crowbar is very kindly supported by our Patreon backers, who allow us to do obviously this show, but also the spin-off pods like Miniatures Monthly that Tom and I are doing, and some other things that we're definitely doing fairly soon. Tom, you
an hour of Horizon.
and an hour of Horizon Zero Dawn.
If you want me to talk about for an hour about the thing I've been playing, I can do that.
Saying in that way makes it sound underwhelming, but it's good. Listen to it.
Also, you didn't get charged for that, right? You just get charged.
No,
for the
you don't get
weekly
charged for
pod,
it. So the
me
Patreon,
doing that was totally bonus.
Absolutely. So the Patreon only charges you for the main episodes, of which there is one a week. Everything else we do is just funded by that, so there's no separate charge for it. And we do have some interesting plans for what we're going to do after that. Thanks to all our Patreon backers, and it's thanks to you specifically that I'm not trying to sell you a razor right now.
Or a meal from Blue Apron where you can...
Or a series of healthy snacks.
Yeah.
Like healthy snack boxes, yeah, anything like that.
Any kind of
we are
box of
in
snacks.
so much fucking trouble. Please fund the Patreon, because otherwise we have
We've
to
burned
eat.
all the bridges we have, man.
Like, don't make me eat this humble pie.
Imagine if your space in the web was square. That's what I'm saying.
God, I mean, I'm just having this vision of myself, like, on my hands and knees begging Audible.
Imagine if the
I'm
books you
so
listen
sorry.
to... Imagine the books you listen to could be heard in any way. They would be audible, I would say.
Indeed. Tom, stop it. If you would like to follow us as individuals, which is a phrase that I fear has gotten stranger the more times I've said it, you can do so if you must. I'm on Twitter at CThurston, that's CTHURSTEN.
I, Tom Francis, am Pentadact, P-E-N-T-A-D-A-C-T.
It's been a while, hasn't it?
Yep.
I, Tom Senior, am at PCG Ludo, which is Ludo.
Much more professional. Right
we
there
go.
straight away.
Right in.
Sorry, bye.
That's a mine, Chris.